What if Naruto was a king in DxD Part 2 Journey of a King? He suddenly appeared, floating in the sky above the elemental nations. There was no sign that caused his appearance. He was just there. His red eyes glanced around. From his position in the sky he was able to spot the faint shimmering of lights in the dark night below him. Probably from a small village, he guessed. A holographic map of the elemental nations appeared before him. As he looked at it he realized just how small it was compared to the other world. A large difference was that, compared to the other world, the elemental nations was just one supercontinent. Just one big continent that held the 5 great nations with a few smaller islands scattered around. Let's see, he muttered as he kept his eyes on the map before him. Ah, there it is. He spotted Uzu no Kuni on the map after letting his eyes roam for a bit. Seems it's closer to Land of Fire than I initially thought it would be. I am currently floating above Land of Stone. Interesting. He spotted the small red blip on the map. Weok indicated his position. He uncloaked himself, making him visible for anyone to see, not that they could reach him if they did. The only ones that were capable of flight as far as he knew were Onoki and Sasuke, but he doubted either of them would know he was there at the moment. Having finished those thoughts he turned around before setting course towards Uzushiogakure. He closed his eyes as he began to travel. A short nap wouldn't hurt. A few hours later his eyes fluttered open before immediately squinting them almost completely closed as he was subjected to the sun directly shining in his face. Once more opening them, this time more carefully, he noticed that he was no longer moving but instead hovering in one place. Map reappearing once more, he noticed he was hovering directly above his location and commanded the aircraft to lower itself on the island that was Uzu no Kuni. Standing up from where he was seated he casually hopped off, landing on the firm ground and began walking. Behind him a golden glow encompassed the Vimana before it was gone. He stopped before looking around. Everywhere he looked were destroyed buildings. Evidence from the attack they suffered under Kiri, Kumo and Iwa. He was surprised no one actually did something with the land after so many years. Continuing his walk for a bit he suddenly stopped. "Come out, now," he said. For a moment nothing happened before slowly numerous figures appeared around him. Bandits, he thought as he spotted their outfit and weapons they carried. "Ho! Look what we got here, boys," one of them said as they began to circle him. "Tell me, boy, what's a noble like yourself doing here? Perhaps if you answer us we might let you go, after you hand over your possessions, of course." He finished with a laugh that was soon joined by his comrades. "Are you threatening me, mongrel? I guess I should show you your place like the dog you are." The air behind him rippled and they watched as he pushed his hand inside. Retracting his hand they saw that he now had a weapon in his hand, a sword to be precise. It looked like a normal sword, with the exception of the blade itself being made out of pure gold. "You should be honored to die by one of my treasures." As he finished that sentence he moved. None of the bandits had managed to catch him as he reappeared behind the man that threatened him, his sword sticking out of his chest as he gurgled on his own blood. "Weak," was all he said as he kicked his body away. Seeing one of their own killed with such ease snapped them out of their state of shock as they began their attack. Naruto had no problems dodging their attacks, often moving just enough for their weapons to fly by. Moving his head to the side he dodged a swipe that was aimed for his face before he quickly cut the offending arm off. Not letting the man react he used the momentum from the swing to twirl on his heel and cut off his head. Spotting an axe heading his way from the corner of his eye he, instead of blocking, sent out a swing of his own, his weapon shattering the bandit's axe with no resistance as he cut through the man's face from the nose up with little problem. By now the surrounding bandits were scared. They just watched this supposedly noble kill 3 of their own in a brutal and uncaring manner. This is not how they expected this to go. They expected the man to be afraid and hand over his valuables before begging for mercy. Instead they got a swordmaster that was making quick work of them. Their hands began to shake as they were wondering between attacking or retreating. Having enough, Naruto snapped his fingers as the air rippled behind him and numerous weapons poked out. Then, with a flick of his wrist the weapons shot out. They had no time to react as the weapons shot at them with incredible speed, impaling them straight through their heart. "TCH, such a waste of my time," he muttered before looking himself over and was pleased the kimono he wore was untouched. Sparing their corpses one last glance he continued his walk till he came across a clearing. Nodding to himself he snapped his fingers once more, this time though the area before him began to glow golden. He himself had to squint as the light was too bright even for him. When the light died down he looked at what was before him. A small cabin was there. Despite its size the aura around it radiated that it was only meant for the best if the best. Pleased with himself Naruto entered the cabin and saw that there was a desk with a chair ready for him. Summoning a few scrolls from the vault, he went over his plans to have the elemental nations under his control. Glancing around, he seemed to miss something before realizing what exactly. Appearing in his hand was a small picture stand. He smiled as he looked at the picture that was placed inside of it. It was on of Kuno and Yasaka when she was a bit younger. Taking one last look, he put it on the corner of his desk before he began to look at some of the scrolls laid out before him. Naruto released a sigh as he read over his plans once more. He had finished earlier and was giving it a look over. From what he could come up with was that if everything would go according to plan, something he doubted. Regardless though, if he were to invest a large amount of money, for them at least, in these villages, it should only take a couple years before the great villages would rely solely on him. To speed this up a bit, he would have to start buying up their buildings, one by one, until he would own a large portion of their respective villages. Another option was to kill their daimyos and take over in their place. However, he wrote that off as it wouldn't work out for him. If he were to do that, he would have to fill in their place for the time being, something he wasn't all too interested in. Finishing his thoughts, he stood up from his seat and headed outside. Once outside, he made a familiar hand seal. Kage Bunshin no Jutsu, he called before numerous puffs of smoke obscured his vision. Once gone, he was met with the view of just less than 24 clones. Make 4 groups of 5. He told the clones, who did what they were asked. Good, now I want one of each group to henge themselves into a noble-looking person while the other 4 henge themselves into guards. Each of you 4 groups is going to one of the 5 villages with the exception of Konoha, that one is mine. He walked up to the clones before applying a seal to each of them. The seal will make it so you keep that appearance for the entire time, which should be more than enough. I also gave each of you enough chakra to last a week, so I want you to be done before that, understood? He received a chorus of highs in return. Good, now go and only pop once you're done and out of the village. With that said, the groups were off. Each of them traveling in a full sprint that would allow them to reach their destination within days, depending on how far. Keeping his eyes on the spot his clone occupied for another moment, he decided it was time for him to move as well. Instead of sprinting like his clones, he took a more casual approach and just began to walk. It was early in the evening and Naruto could still be seen walking. It had been over a day since he started his trip and had multiple urges to use his Vimana and just fly towards his location. Suddenly he stopped as his head snapped to his left. He could sense numerous chakra signatures heading his way. Using a quick henge to turn his hair more flat and brown and his eyes went from blood red to gray, he waited in his spot for a moment. Can you come out, Shinobi-san? Naruto requested after sensing their eyes on him. Not receiving a reply, he turned his head slightly before making eye contact with the supposed hidden nin. Finally, after what seemed like forever, 4 blurs appeared before him, each of them wearing an animal-themed mask. State your business in Fire Country, the bear masked man said. I'm heading towards Konohagakure no Sato for business. No guards? The Anbu asked him. He couldn't really blame him, as it wasn't often you would see a noble travel all by himself, especially not with bandits and perhaps even enemy shinobi around. No guards. I have been trained in ninja arts since early age in case something would ever happen that would kill any guards I have. Now that you're here though, wouldn't you mind escorting me to Konoha? I can pay for this mission, I guess, once we arrive. The Anbu seemed to share a few glances with each other before nodding at him. Thank you very much. Lead the way, Anbu-san, he replied before motioning the masked man to begin. If they were expecting him to bow, they came to the wrong guy. It was late in the evening as he along with his escort spotted the village. He knew through that despite doing their best to hide it, they were shocked by how easy he was able to maintain high Jonin speeds. The fact that they could barely sense any chakra coming from him just added to that mystery. Umbra squad, Bear Taiko reporting back from scouting. He heard the now leader of the squad he was traveling with inform the gate guards. The guard gave the group a look over before his eyes rested on him. Who is that? He pointed at Naruto. A man we came across during our scouting. He requested for us to escort him to Konohagakure. I see, the guard said before beckoning him to come forth. Doing what was requested of him, he stopped in front of the man who proceeded to look him over. Name please. He held out a notebook and a pen. Accepting it, he wrote down his name and gave it back. Soji Kairo. It read. All right then, welcome in Konohagakure, they said to him, and Naruto looked around and noticed the Anbu near him were gone. Not bothered too much, he stepped inside the village he hoped he never had to enter again. As he walked through the busy streets of Konoha, he noticed just how unscathed the village was from the war that they had. Even now he could see couples and younger children walking around, talking like the war had never even happened. He stopped in his tracks as the familiar smell of ramen entered his nose. His eyes following the smell, which led to a certain shop he used to come so often, Ichiraku's ramen. With a shrug of his shoulders he made his way over. It wouldn't hurt him to eat there once more, as long as he didn't order over 15 bowls like his old self would. They shouldn't recognize him. Taking a seat he gazed at the father-daughter couple that stood behind the counter. He could see the bags under their eyes and felt somewhat bad. As far as he remembered they had been nothing but nice to them, from when he was just a small malnourished boy to when he was older. Then he had just left them and the rest of the shinobi world without even saying anything. He was brought out of his thoughts as the brown-haired girl, or woman Ayame, waved her hand in front of his face. "Yes?" he asked. "I was asking for your order," she answered with a kind smile. "Ah, sorry. I'll have a bowl of miso ramen please." Ayame smiled before she relayed his order to her father in the back. "So, what brings you here?" the girl asked in an attempt to start a conversation. Looking her over once he deduced that she was just curious and it wouldn't hurt to answer her. "Oh me, I'm here for business. How did you know I'm not from around here?" "That's easy. I noticed the way you were looking around as you walked through the streets. It was like you were intrigued or something." He chuckled at her reply. "Correct, seems you're quite smart for a girl that serves ramen, nay?" he joked. She was about to speak up when they were interrupted by a loud voice. "Ayame, 4 bowls of salt ramen please." The owner of the voice plopped down next to him and he saw that it was his sister. "Sure Nami." Ayame acknowledged the younger girl. Suddenly a bowl was put before him with a pair of chopsticks. He thanked the older man as he began to eat with grace one wouldn't expect had they known who he was. From the corner of his eye he saw his younger sister staring at him as he ate some of the noodles. "Excuse me, can you not stare at me like that?" he politely asked the younger blonde who scratched the back of her head at being caught. "Sorry, it's just that you seem familiar. Have we met before?" he shook her head. "Not that I know of, sorry, this is my first time here in Konoha," he answered before continuing with his food. He hoped she got the hint and allowed him to eat in peace. His prayers were answered as Nami's own food was served and she began to dive in. "Was that how I used to look?" he couldn't help but wonder with no small amount of disgust as she seemed to stuff her mouth full. Loud smacking noises as she didn't even close her mouth while chewing. The fact that she was raised by her parents made it even worse. Finishing his food he put down his money before he stood up. His gaze shifted upwards to the moon that shone brightly in the night sky. As he looked he realized just how much cleaner this world was compared with the other. One of the few good things that came from the fact that they were a lot less advanced than back home. Yes, home. He had already decided that this world wasn't his home. No, his home was where Kuno and Yusaka were, nowhere else. It's late, he spared the direction the Hokage's building was at a glance. I guess it wouldn't hurt to go there early next morning. With that in mind he set off to the location. He knew there was a hotel for him to stay the night. He woke up the following morning with a groan of irritation. It had to be the worst night of sleep he had ever had. The bed he was laying on, it might as well be a rock with how hard it was for his back. Not to mention that after being used to sleeping with someone next to him it was hard for him to fall asleep without an extra source of warmth. Then there was also the mild headache he had. Apparently one of the group of clones he had sent out had met their location, Kirigakure, while the others were close and should arrive sometime soon. Getting out of bed he stretched his muscles, his bones snapping as he let out a sigh in relief. Looking to his right he spotted his kimono where he put it yesterday evening and put it on. Yusaka sighed for the 10th time today. She missed him. Despite it being only a few days since he left, the lack of him being around was easily noticed by the slight frown that marred her face. She had gotten used to him being around again after he left for close to a year before. And now he was gone again. She didn't like waking up in bed alone and allowed Kuno to sleep with her. Her daughter also clearly missed him as she seemed more calmer than usual. Normally she would be happy, however she was quite the bundle of energy and that behavior didn't fit well. She was always more of a daddy's girl. It didn't mean her daughter didn't like her or anything. It was just that Kuno expressed herself more when her father was around. Something she wasn't sure if she should be upset about or not. Thinking about him made her remember to plan a meeting with the elders regarding the idea he proposed her. She was almost 100% sure they would be delighted at his idea. Devils forcing members from different factions to become a part of their peerages had always been a big problem, especially for yokai, as they already were smaller than the other 3. She had voiced her disapproval to the new Maos when she heard of Ajuka's invention, as they didn't have anything to stop devils from forcing others to join. She chuckled softly. It was just for devils to take what they want and not bother with the consequences. She could only imagine what would happen if someone would try to force Kuno into joining their peerage. Naruto would most likely kill them on the spot now that she thought about it, and she would help him. Suddenly a golden glow filled her office, causing her to look away lest she be blinded by how bright it was. Sensing the brightness was gone, she turned to look who intruded her office, only for her eyes to widen as she bowed her head. Amaterasu-sama. Yasaka greeted the goddess with her head still bowed in respect. Raise your head, Yasaka, Amaterasu said to the bowing foxwoman. The woman in question did what was asked and looked at the dark-haired woman before her. Her golden eyes, which, unlike her own, were so bright it was as if she was looking at the sun itself, looked at her with an emotion she wasn't quite sure where to put it. She was wearing a dark kimono with small suns around the sleeves as she looked at her with a frown. I told you that you don't have to call me Sama, didn't I? We've known each other for quite long and I like to say we are good acquaintances at least. Sorry, Amaterasu. Amaterasu. She corrected herself as she spotted the glare sent her way. What can I do for you? She took the empty seat in front of her. News reached me of a certain man you and Kuno were seen with, care to explain? What do you mean? Yasaka asked, trying to dodge her question. Don't play stupid with me, Yasaka. Reports reached me of you being seen walking hand in hand with a blonde man. Not to mention that he was seen walking alone with your daughter as well. Damn, how did she know that? Yasaka couldn't help but wonder. However, it also raised concerns that she should increase the security around Kyoto. While someone like Amaterasu, who is a member of the Shinto faction, are expected to have spies everywhere, it was concerning as it was possible fallen or even devils to gain this information if they have spies around. Very well then, it seems I can't keep anything a secret from you. That man you were talking about, his name is Naruto Uzumaki. He is my mate and Kunu's father. Straight to the point she went, as it wouldn't help her much to lie to a goddess such as the one sitting before her. She saw Amaterasu's eyes widen at that piece of information before they narrowed. How come you didn't inform me of this information before? She had asked her before regarding the status of Kunu's father, but at the time she said he was someone unimportant man that didn't want anything to do with her or Kuno. He asked me not to. He didn't want himself to be known to the supernatural world. Something no doubt would happen once news would come out about my mate. She reasoned with the goddess, who seemed to accept the reason she was given after a moment of staring. Yes, she could see where she was coming from, as Yasaka was an important figure in the supernatural world despite her faction being neutral. I see, I will forgive you for keeping that information away from me this time. Where is he anyway? A frown made itself known on her face. He's not here at the moment. He said he had to deal with problems back home that could potentially harm either me or our daughter. So as much as I don't like it, he's currently somewhere else. Why? Oh, no reason. I just want to see who the man was that was able to steal your heart. She laughed softly at the glare sent her way. Don't give me that look, Yasaka-chan. How long have they been bothering for you to have children or take a mate only for you to blow them off? It makes me curious as to how special he must be for you to talk so fondly about him. Ah, he's special all right, she said fondly. Really now? She leaned forward. Tell me something about him. Yasaka looked at her for a moment before shrugging. It wouldn't hurt to reveal a bit about him. Not to mention that it was better than doing whatever she was doing before she arrived. Pleasure doing business with you, Hokage Dono, a disguised Naruto said with a bow. Tsunade mimicked his actions as she held a small smile. They had just finished negotiations for the past hour and had come to agreements. He had bought up a lot of older property in the village. Most of it was in the bad parts of the town. Not that he cared about that though, as he now owned just a bit over 20% of Konoha. A bit less than he wanted, but it was to be expected as most of the land was already used by the clans that were living in the village. Aside from that, he had invested a hefty sum of money in the village itself, something he knew they could use as they were still rebuilding from the war, and any money was welcome. It was actually what made him sure he would have similar success in the other villages. Not to mention that with their daimyos all being paranoid, they could use any money they could get. From the memory he received from the clones he had sent to Kirigakure, he managed to get more out of it than Konoha. He managed to buy almost 30% of the village that was now his. Of course it was still ruled by their cage, however the ground was his and that was all that mattered. Their cage however was quite the flirt. Not that it had any effect on him though, as her beauty couldn't quite keep up with Yasaka's own. He was glad the currency here, Ryo, was worth a lot less than the ones used back home. You too, Kairo-san. I'll take my leave then. Perhaps I will look around and see what else Konoha has to offer. Do you require any guards or someone that can show you around? Naruto waved her off. I'm sure I will be fine on my own, thank you. Giving one last bow, he walked out. Opening the door, he almost bumped into someone he really wished he didn't have to see. Minato Namikaze and Uzumaki Kushina. Oh sorry, are you alright? He heard Minato ask him. I'm fine, Namikaze-san. If you don't mind, I wish to proceed. He motioned for them to step aside. Oh, of course, he. He rubbed the back of his head sheepishly as he let the man through. Thank you, they heard the man say before he was gone. Interesting. They murmured as they watched his back as he continued his stride. After he disappeared from their view, they knocked once before entering the office. Inside they found Tsunade wearing a large smile as she looked at the paper in her hand. Tsunade-sama, what made you so happy? Kushina asked the smiling Senju. In response, she handed the paper over to them, enjoying their expression as they read what was on it. So many zeros, Minato muttered as he stared at the piece of paper in disbelief. Is this real, Tsunade-sama? The older woman nodded her head. Correct, Minato, it is real. I didn't believe it either until the man showed me scrolls filled with cash. He invested hundreds of millions of ryo in Konoha, something we can really use. The daimyo will be delighted when he hears this. No offense, Tsunade-sama, but isn't this a bit suspicious? Minato asked, getting Kushina to look at him in confusion. I know what you mean, Minato, however, the man is real. He comes from a small but very prosperous family whose members have all been killed during the war. He's also trained in ninja arts, which is surprising as most men like him usually let others do their work. But if it eases your worries, I have sent some Anbu to watch over him. Both for his and our own safety. She saw that he looked pleased. Now, is there anything else as to why you are here? She watched as they changed their posture and stood straight. Yes, Tsunade-sama, I was wondering if there is anyone left with a space-time technique like Kakashi's Kamui. We have a few ideas as to how to reach Naruto, but I think we would need something of that caliber in order to pull it off. Tsunade hummed as she closed her eyes in thought. Someone with a space-time technique similar to Kakashi's Kamui. Her eyes snapped open as she looked at the two. Uchiha Sasuke. Sakura told me his Rinnegan or Mangekyo Sharingan allowed him to travel through dimensions. Reportedly he used it during their fight with Kagaya. You sure about that? I imagine that if he was capable of entering the dimension Naruto's in, he would have already used it, as he seemed adamant of fighting my son. Perhaps it isn't because he didn't but because he couldn't. Kushina butted in. Seeing their looks, she explained. One of his eyes allows him to travel through dimensions, as you said, yes. Now what if those dimensions differ from the one Naruto is in? I mean, Kagaya wasn't capable of entering the same dimension either, so what if they were missing something? Something that allowed them to lock on that specific dimension instead, one of the many random and empty ones. Both looked at her for a moment. What? She asked, annoyed by their stares. Oh, nothing, it's just that you've been so quiet for a while. Minato said to his wife, who scratched the back of her head. It seemed that was a trait in every member of their family, Tsunade thought. Remembering Naruto used to do the same. Anyway, Minato, Kushina, how's Nami doing? At the mention of their daughter, a smile appeared on their faces. Great. She's been training very hard since her brothers left and promised to return him to him. She has finished the Rasengan and can do it with one hand now. We're helping her add an element to it next, just like Naruto has done. Interesting. What is her elemental affinity? Is it wind like Naruto or something different? Water. She has inherited Kushina-chan's water affinity. If you need any help, you should ask Kakashi. He had helped Naruto when he was making his wind Rasengan. Tsunade informed them, and a pang of guilt ran through Minato. He had finally managed to explain everything to Kakashi, from his death to somehow being alive once more. Despite that, though, he wasn't sure if their relationship would ever return as it was before, as he could tell he sometimes wanted nothing to do with him. Another reason was because someone else had helped his son with his achievement. Since the first time Kushina had informed him she was pregnant with Naruto, he had looked forward to father-son training. The fact that Nami hadn't inherited his elemental affinity made it so he couldn't help her much when it came to ninjutsu. Naruto was walking through the streets once more. This time the sun was shining brightly down on him. His face showed no emotion as he glanced at a couple academy children playing around with wooden kunai. In a few years they would graduate before wasting their lives for an ungrateful village. Most of them would die, only to be forgotten shortly afterwards. He shook his head. He was glad his own daughter didn't have to do anything of such. No, if practices such as these were being done back home, he was sure the government would have shot them down immediately. Something that was good, as he wouldn't want Kuno to have to waste her life for a village filled with ungrateful dogs. He and Yusaka would train her, yes, but she wasn't going to take weird missions that would have her risk her life. No, he would do his best so she would never have to anything of such. He wondered, and a part of him hoped she too would unlock the gate of Babylon. However, he didn't know if it was possible for two of them to have said skill at the same time. It wasn't ever recorded either, as he was the first one to have gained the ability. He shrugged off those thoughts. Kuno was still young and he wasn't going to start training her until she got older. Even then he was sure Yusaka wanted to train her before him, as she should have inherited her ability to use fox fire, something that was only used by kitsune yokai. He should however start her on chakra control exercised as soon as he could. He had sensed the large amount of chakra she had in her, and so did Yusaka. It was easily comparable to some junins, and if she had the same issues he had when he was younger, it would be best if she would start soon. Suddenly he stopped walking and gazed upon a familiar-looking building. It was the rundown apartment complex he lived in for most of his years. Sensing a few Anbu watching him, he entered a busy crowd before creating a smokeless clone and immediately using an advanced genjutsu to make him invisible and basic wind manipulation to remove any sound he made. Seeing his clone continuing its walk with the Anbu following him, he concluded his plan worked and made his way to his old apartment. The door made a creaking noise as he pushed it open and he immediately stopped moving. Did no one enter his apartment since the war had ended? Was the thought that went through his mind. He had expected them to have at least searched through his apartment in search of hints as to where he was. Though, evident by the dust that collected itself, it seems that they didn't. Oh well, with a shrug of his shoulders he stepped inside the glum apartment. He moved through his apartment, looking around in disgust. How could they have allowed anyone to live here? He was sure that if he would jump a couple times the apartment would break down. Entering the bedroom, he glanced around before he moved close to the bed and knelt down. Once he did that, he knocked a few times on the old wooden planks on the floor before finding what he came for. He removed one of the planks and reached in. Retrieving his hand, he was now holding a small black box. He opened it before smiling, as it was indeed untouched. Inside of it was one picture that held a lot of sentimental value to him. It was the day Kuno was born. It showed Yusaka laying in bed holding a small bundle in her arms. He himself was sitting next to her on the bed, a smile on his face as he was looking at both of them. He was glad no one else had found this picture, as it would raise questions he had no interest in answering. Not to forget, he would probably turn the village upside down if some random person was holding onto it. Grabbing the picture, he put the box back where it was before placing the plank back as well. Giving it another look over, he nodded to himself before he decided to leave. Stepping outside, an alarm inside of his apartment went off. Fuck. They had placed a trap in his apartment. Using a shunshin, he disappeared without a trace. Which was good, as mere seconds later a pair of Anbu appeared before his old apartment. The two communicated with a few hand signs before they nodded and entered the apartment. They would come out a few minutes later before reporting to the Hokage. Yusaka was walking through the hallway towards the meeting room. Her geta making clacking noises each time they came in contact with the floor. She had requested a meeting to be held and they had finally responded. Entering the room, she gave those present a look over before nodding to herself and stood before them. Honorable elders. She greeted them with a slight bow. I have called you here today to discuss an idea my mate had come up with. I, myself, already approve of it, however I would like your input on the matter. She spotted them all listening and inwardly smirked. A few days ago Naruto came into my office and proposed a way for members of our race that were forced into servitude by devils to be cleansed. He told me that with the usage of sealing he should be able to remove the darkness, so to speak, from those that are reincarnated. The demonic energy that they have due to being a half-devil would transform into chakra, restoring their status as yokai. Once her explanation was gone, she looked at their faces, or their shocked expressions to be precise. Yusaka-sama, did we hear that correct? Your mate is able to return our members that were forced into servitude back to normal. She could clearly hear the disbelief in the man's voice. Not that she could blame them, as evil pieces were created by one of the Maos. Nonetheless, though, she nodded her head. If her mate told her he could, she trusted him. You heard that correct, Miro Dono. He already had an idea in mind but wanted to wait for approval first before he would waste any time on it, only for it to be rejected. Despite the fact that if I agreed it would happen, regardless what you prunes' opinions on the subject are. Yes, she might ask for their opinions on his or her own ideas, but if she decided something was going to happen, it would, and there was nothing they could do about it. She was still a Kyuubi no Kitsune and had more power than any of them. The only one that was capable of opposing her was Naruto, but the chance of that happening were so small she wasn't even going to bother to think about it. From the looks on your faces, I take it you approve of his idea. She asked them with a smirk in place. They shared a glance before turning to her and nodding. If he was truly capable of designing such a thing, then they needed it. Great, she chirped. I'll let him know once he returns. With that, the meeting is over. She gave one final bow before leaving them to themselves. Tsunade was still talking with both Minato and Kushina when they were interrupted by the arrival of two of her Anbu. Tiger, Sparrow, what are you doing here? She asked the Anbu who interrupted her talk with Kushina and Minato. Sorry Hokage-sama, but we're here to inform you that someone has entered Uzumaki-san's apartment and triggered the alarm. What? The trio exclaimed in shock. That's impossible, as only a family member can enter his apartment. Minato and Kushina had put a special barrier around his apartment that would only allow someone with a similar chakra signature to enter, which meant it was either Naruto, Kushina, Minato or Nami. Afterwards an alarm would trigger as they declared his apartment off limits. Hi Hokage-sama. We saw signs of entry and it looked like they were searching for something. Exactly what it was we don't know, as there was nothing left. Tsunade looked at them for a moment to see if they had anything else to say. When it was clear they didn't. Very well. I expect a more detailed report early tomorrow. Dismissed. The two left without a trace, leaving them all to think about what they were just told. Single quote. You think that? Kushina began, and the others immediately knew what she was implying. I wouldn't count it out for now. They said that whoever it was that entered was looking for something, so it is possible Naruto was there to grab something he had forgotten to take before leaving. Something very important. Then we should look to see if he's still in the village. Kushina urged both her husband and the Hokage. Minato shook his head. Kushina-chan, do you really think Naruto is still in the village? I want to look for him as much as you do, but we both know that he's long gone, especially with that weird aircraft of his. Even I can't travel that fast. Seeing Kushina wanting to protest Tsunade, but Minato is correct, Kushina. Our best option is to send someone to look for Sasuke so he can help us getting Naruto back. Okay, she said dejectedly before Minato hugged her. Several miles away from Konoha, Naruto could be seen walking, this time using a different henge. He had left the village the moment the alarm went off. The clone he made earlier, however, was still there as to not raise any suspicion. A big weight was removed from his chest as he dug into his pocket and took out the picture. God knows what could have happened had any of them accidentally discovered it. Channeling a large amount of chakra, he released it as it sent out a pulse. A few seconds later he closed his eyes before opening them and removing the henge surrounding him. He had sent out a chakra pulse in an attempt to see if anyone was following him or if there was someone nearby. The signal, having returned without any problems, told him he was alone, and with that the area before him began to ripple as he called on his Vimana. He had no interest in walking all the way back, not to mention he would likely not make it back in the time he had told Yusaka he was gone. He had seen how she reacted when he had told her he would be gone for just a week. He didn't want to cause her more worries. With that in mind, he hopped on before making his way to Uzushiogakure. Going at a pace that was faster than Jonin but not too quick. It was night time as he neared the small island that is Uzu no Kuni. From where he was at, he could see a small light source down on the island. No doubt from the cabin he had left behind. As he was about to lower himself, his danger senses went in overdrive and he quickly commanded the aircraft to move to the right. Just in time, as not even a second later a large, purple translucent arrow shot by. He kept his eyes on the arrow as it kept going and going till he could no longer see it. Ho! A smile crept on his face as there was only person capable of using said technique, and turned around, looking down at the small purple figure he spotted in the distance. Sasuke. He kept his eyes on his Susanoo while he was still hovering in the air. His eyes widening were the only sign of him noticing another arrow being fired at him. Deciding to humor him, he stood up from his throne and channeled chakra into the hand that held the sun mark. His hand began to glow brightly, and then, just as the arrow was about to reach him, he jabbed forward. Despite not being able to see it, he could pretty much imagine Sasuke's expression as with a single jab he had managed to cut through his arrow. For a split second he entered his chakra mode. Despite that though, it was enough for Sasuke, who was able to feel the increase in power and reacted by increasing the amount of chakra sent to his eyes. Naruto watched his Susanoo grew taller and taller. From where he was he could sense the enormous chakra output of Sasuke as his Susanoo grew to its complete form. Its glowing eyes seemed to be glaring straight up to him. He was sure the entire land of fire was able to feel Sasuke's chakra with how much he was releasing. Despite that though, he found himself not caring as a large grin formed itself on his face. Holding both hands in front of him, he began to form a Bijudama, though he kept it on the smaller scale. Satisfied by its size, he aimed it at Sasuke before letting it loose. His eyes following its movements as it came closer and closer. Returning the favor, Sasuke commanded his Susanoo to put its hand on its sword, cutting the Bijudama in half, similar as to what he did to his own attack. Both halves of the Bijudama traveled past him before hitting the ground. A large explosion happening the moment it touched the ground, kicking up enough dust and dirt to completely cover his Susanoo from his view. Once again his eyes widened. This time due to the fact that Sasuke's Susanoo came flying at him with neck-breaking speeds, not bothered by the debris that bounced off of it. Quickly he sat back on the seat and commanded the Vamana to turn around before shooting forward at an incredible speed. His loud laughter could be heard throughout the night sky as they were locked in a dogfight. Ha ha ha, I haven't had this much fun in a while. He screamed from the top of his lungs as he managed to dodge another arrow sent his way. He was moving from left to right with Sasuke mimicking his every move. Making a cross seal, he summoned a few dozen clones that exploded as soon Sasuke passed them. Suddenly he turned the aircraft around while still moving. Sasuke's eyes widened slightly as he looked the familiar jutsu Naruto was holding. Take this, Fuden, Rasenshuriken. With that he threw the shuriken-shaped Rasengan at Sasuke, who had stopped moving as his Susanoo conjured up a bow. Enten. Susanoo Kagutsuchi. He quickly countered as he fired an Amaterasu-powered arrow at the incoming disc. Both attacks pressed against each other in a battle for dominance but ended up in a stalemate as they both exploded in a combination of wind-powered black flames that were spreading everywhere. In Konoha, numerous shinobi were able to sense the large spikes of chakra that would happen every so often and were able to see the night sky lit up in the distance. Tsunade had sent Anbu to the locations they were happening, though she doubted anything would come from it as they seemed so far away. As the effect of their attacks died down, Naruto and Sasuke could be seen staring at one another. Done already? Naruto asked Sasuke, who was glaring at him as he held a smirk. If you're not going to reply, I'll take it as yes and we'll leave. His smirk didn't disappear despite what he was saying. Dobi. No, Naruto, what are you doing here? I thought you never wanted to step a foot here again. Sasuke corrected himself. Oh, you know, just some business and whatnot. Now, why did you attack me? He asked with a pout. I still want to fight you. Full power, no holding back. No. Sasuke was taken back by his reply. He was sure that he would accept his offer judging by the way he was acting earlier. Seeing his reaction, he decided to elaborate. You're too weak at the moment. If we were to fight, I would win and that would be boring. Not me winning. No, it would be over too fast, which is no fun, he. So, how about you go training a bit more and search for me once you gain some strength, Naruto, he growled out his name as he listened to him speak. Calling him weak. Him, the last Uchiha, weak. He had fought a goddess and sealed her into the moon, yet he was being called weak. Naruto raised one of his hands as he saw the reaction Sasuke had due to his words. Listen, was all Sasuke heard before he suddenly froze as he was assaulted by the overwhelming feeling of dread. What is this? Sasuke asked himself as he couldn't even move a single muscle. With great effort he managed to divert his eyes only to see, much to his shock, that his hand was shaking. Am I scared? Suddenly the invisible pressure around him was gone and he slowly looked up, right into the red eyes of Naruto. This time, however, any playfulness from before was gone. Do you see now, the difference between us? You would more than just your Rinnegan to beat me, seeing as you froze up from my bloodlust. This strength, it's due to Konoha's treatment of me when I was younger. All my bottled up emotions the old me held behind his dumb smile. This is who you are dealing with, Sasuke. So go and train, get stronger, and when the time comes for us to fight, it will be the greatest battle the world will ever see. A slight crazed look was seen in his eyes before he left. Like before, no trace was left behind, leaving Sasuke floating midair, his Susanoo still around him. Sasuke clenched his fist as Naruto's words rang through his mind. Weak. He was weak compared to Naruto. He bit back a curse as he increased the pressure of his own fist, blood slowly leaking down his hand. The aura he had released at him was unlike anything he had ever felt in his life. So malicious he couldn't help but shiver slightly as he remembered it. Never before had he felt so afraid in his life. Not even when Itachi massacred his clan. Even Orochimaru's killing intent back when they were genin was nothing compared to the overwhelming aura of the blonde. As much as he wanted to deny his words, they were true. Even now, with that weird aircraft, Naruto was able to keep out of range of his Susanoo and he wasn't even taking him seriously. He was going to do what he had suggested and train. Train like he had never done before, so that when they would meet he would live up and exceed his expectations. They would meet and have a fight so destructive it would make the Valley of the End look like the result of a bunch of children playing in comparison. With that in mind, Sasuke was off. The wings of his Susanoo flapping behind him as he left the area they had fought. Unknown to both himself and Naruto, a squad of Anbu had managed to spot Sasuke speaking to someone they were unable to correctly identify. They would return and report what they had seen to their Hokage. Naruto appeared high above the sky around Japan. Immediately he was assaulted by a headache as all of the clones he had sent out had popped due to him no longer being present in said world. A frown formed itself as he went over the memories he received. It seemed his mission partly failed when it came to Kumo and I would due to him not able to buy any ground there. He was however able to invest a large sum of money, which was good as it was the beginning of his takeover. What are you going to do now? Kurama suddenly spoke up. Oh, here I thought you were asleep seeing as you were so quiet during my little chase with Sasuke. Naruto said as he held a smirk Kurama could almost see despite not being there in person. Single quote, single quote, dot dot dot, single quote, single quote. He heard his tenant mutter something incoherently. But to answer your question, I have my hand in 2 of the 5 great villages. I didn't expect Gaara to decline, but he was always somewhat untrusting. Perhaps had revealed myself he would have accepted, but oh well. I have large investments in the 4 villages and their daimyo will no doubt take note of the sudden influx of money. Regardless though, with the increase of money I expect them to increase their military power, which will make others cautious of them. The relations between villages will get even worse before soon it will be just like the old days where you couldn't trust your allies. So despite me giving them a boost, it will only weaken them in the long run, making it perfect for me to take over, as sooner or later their money will run out with how paranoid they are and they will be relying on me to keep themselves afloat. Low chuckling was heard. I have to admit I'm impressed with your planning. However, what will you do if something doesn't go how you planned it? If it comes down to that, I will remove their daimyo and put a puppet in place. Someone that listens to every command of mine. I really hope it doesn't come down to that, as it would be a lot of work to keep up. Now, if you're done, I'm going to see how my family is doing. TCH, fine brat. Kurama said as it closed its eyes and went to sleep. With the speed he traveled, it took him just a few minutes before he arrived in Kyoto. Exiting the Vimana, the aircraft disappeared without any command as he began heading towards the home he along with Yusaka and Kuno lived in. As he walked, golden particles surrounded his form where they stayed for a few seconds before the glow died down. His white kimono changed into a black one with sakura petals imprinted from the neckline down. Sensing the disbelieving looks given to him due to him having changed outfit, he channeled a bit of chakra to his clothes as small seals lit up, effectively erasing their memory of what they just saw. As he neared his home, he spotted a pair of armored Tengu standing guard, both giving him a slight bow as they recognized him. Tilting his head slightly, he entered inside and was immediately assaulted by the smell of home-cooked ramen Yusaka would cook every now and then. Kuno had inherited his love from the food, which prompted Yusaka to figure out a recipe that they both liked. Carefully he walked into the direction the kitchen was in, making sure he wasn't making any sound. Entering the kitchen, he spotted her standing in front of a stove wearing a light blue kimono. Her tails and ears on full display like usually when she was home. That and the fact that Naruto liked how she looked with them visible for all to see. Yusaka was busy preparing dinner for herself and her daughter. She wasn't sure if Naruto was going to be back, but made sure to make enough in case he did. He had promised he would return within a week and it currently had been just under 7 days since he left. She stirred the noodles before adding the correct amount of spices to give it the flavor both he and Kuno liked. She silently cursed him for getting their daughter addicted to the noodle broth. Suddenly she stiffened as a pair of arms encircled her waist and felt a pair of lips kiss her neck. She hadn't even sensed anyone approaching. Relax, Yusaka-chan. She calmed down as she heard the familiar voice of her mate. His head resting on top of her own as Yusaka unconsciously leaned into him. Her own hands resting on top of his. Smells good. Yusaka wasn't sure if he was complimented her or the food, but accepted it regardless as her tails coiled around him. Oh, he moved one of his hands down and began to rub the furry appendages. Nice to see you have returned, she said softly as she moved her head to the side to look at him from the corner of her eyes. Kuno will be happy. Only Kuno. He playfully glared at her before leaning down and kissing her as she stuck her tongue out. But yes, it's nice to be home. He moved his hands upwards to her breast before squeezing them through her kimono. Naruto. Later, she moaned softly at his touch. Say, Yusaka-chan, did anything happen while I was gone? He asked her between kisses. Not really, she said as she wiggled in his grasp. Though the elders liked the idea you proposed and gave it their full support. Really? That's good to hear. His eyes moved to the food she was preparing. I see dinner is just about ready. He received a nod from Yusaka. I'll get Kuno then. I'm sure she will be happy to see me. He gave her one last kiss on her cheek before removing his arms from around her. Naruto stood before the door leading to his daughter's bedroom. It was directly on the opposite side of their own, allowing quick access in case something would happen. Though he had placed both a security and silencing seal on their doors, allowing only someone of his or Yusaka's blood to enter. He knocked twice before waiting for it to open. He didn't have to wait long though, as he could hear small footsteps coming from the other side of the door. Yes, Ka saw. Kuno stopped mid-word as she saw that the person in front of her was not her mother. Tu-san, the small girl asked with a tilt of her head. Tu-san. She jumped at him, wrapping herself around his leg. Naruto laughed at her antics as he tried to remove her from his leg. Come on Kuno, Ka-san has finished making dinner. It seemed to work as she loosed the hold she had on him and looked up. Really? What did Ka-san cook? A glint appeared in his eye, one that she easily remembered. Ramen, she asked, unsure of herself. He nodded. Ramen. Father and daughter stared at each other for a moment before Kuno was off, running as fast as her legs could in hopes of reaching Yusaka first. See you there Tu-san. He watched the spot she previously inhabited before snapping out of his stupor. Ah Kuno, come back here. As he hurried up after her. Care to repeat that, Inu? The voice of Tsunade was heard as she looked down at the kneeling figure of one of the many Anbu members. Hi Hokage-sama, we found the location the chakra spikes were felt from. Once there we spotted Uchiha Sasuke floating in midair with a large purple warrior surrounding him. We saw him staring at another person, this one was hovering in the air with something we weren't able to identify. I see, she murmured as she listened to Inu's report. She only knew of one person that would make Sasuke pull out his Susanoo, but it couldn't be him, right? Inu, can you describe the machine the other person was using? The person Uchiha Sasuke was talking to was floating on from what it seemed like a golden-colored aircraft. I'm sorry Hokage-sama, but I'm not sure what it was aside from the fact that it had a golden color. That's alright Inu, I want you to collect Minato along with Kushina in my office as soon as you can. Very well, should we give them a message? Yes, tell them we have a hint regarding their son, Naruto. If the masked Anbu was surprised he didn't show it. Hi Hokage-sama. With those words the man was gone, leaving Tsunade in her office alone. What caused you to come back here, Naruto? Tsunade couldn't help but ask herself. Before he left he had insulted them along with their way of life, telling them that they were no different than a rabid dog, only good at killing and causing more destruction wherever they went. So the question was, what could cause Naruto to return to the place he hated with all his heart? It was left unanswered as seconds later a yellow flash appeared inside her office, signifying the arrival of both Minato and Kushina. Is it true? Was the first thing that was said as Kushina and Minato both wore serious expressions. They stared at each other before eventually Tsunade nodded her head. Yes, it is true, those chakra spikes we felt the other day came from Sasuke and Naruto. Really? What was he doing back here? We're not sure. Anbu reported that they saw Sasuke with his Susanoo floating in the sky, seemingly conversing with a person on a golden-colored aircraft. She gave knowing looks to both parents that she knew it was Naruto. I know you probably want to look for Naruto, but we both know he's long gone. Anbu said he seemed to vanish in midair. Sounds similar. No, however, just because we can't find Naruto doesn't mean we can't go after Sasuke. After all, it's possible that he's the missing piece needed to reach wherever the Gaki is located. So, what do you want us to do? Kushina asked her. I want you to collect Nami and be back here in an hour. I'll get Anbu to collect me the rest of the rookies who are willing to look for Sasuke. With that command the couple left to inform their daughter of the information they just received. Anbu, Tsunade commanded as two kneeling figures appeared. Orders Hokage-sama, I want you to inform the remaining of the rookies along with Kakashi to be in my office in an hour exact. Be sure to tell Kakashi that I won't tolerate his tardiness. Having said that they left without a trace, allowing Tsunade some breathing room. Sasuke frowned as he stared down at the group of Konoha shinobi. He recognized them as the remainder of his graduation class with the exception of Naruto. His eyes lingered on Hinata for a moment as he wasn't sure it was actually her with how much she had changed since the last time he saw her. He then looked at the younger girl with the same hair color as Naruto. Behind her stood the man he recognized as the fourth Hokage and the red-haired woman he remembered her being his wife. Kakashi was there as well, though he looked uninterested in the whole ordeal. Each of them were standing on guard in case of him attacking. Somehow they managed to find his location. How? He wasn't even sure himself. After his little run-in with Naruto, he had set off to find a good spot to train and get stronger. Yet, somehow they managed to find where he was. He had lowered his chakra output to the minimum and made sure not to leave any traces behind. Unfortunately, it hadn't rained, which could have helped them in their search, but even then, he was close to the borders of Kaminari no Kuni and had hoped to have passed it before anyone would have come looking for him. What do you want? He asked them, slightly annoyed. He should be getting stronger in order to fight Naruto. Not waste him time talking to some shinobi, regardless of who they are. Uchiha Sasuke, Minato spoke up. On orders of the 5th Hokage, Tsunade Senju, we are to ask you to come with us to Konoha. Declining will allow us to use force if necessary. Last time I checked, I was registered as a missing nin. If you agree to return, Hokage-sama will remove your status as missing nin and allow a refuge in Konoha. Sasuke scoffed at his words. And if I refuse, you will attack me. We both know that you don't stand a chance against me. Well, you might. Sasuke glanced at Minato. But the rest is just cannon fodder. Even your Hokage is weaker than me, so if I wanted to go to Konoha I could, and there wouldn't be much you could do about it. Sasuke-kun, please come back to Konoha with us. Tsunade-sama needs you to help us reach Naruto. Sakura pleaded. Sasuke raised an eyebrow at her words. They need him to reach Naruto. Seeing his confused look, Minato decided to elaborate. According to Sakura-san, your dojutsu has an ability to open up portals to different dimensions, correct? Sasuke nodded, still unsure of what they were implying. Well, me and Kasina have figured out a way to open up a portal in space and time, but we're missing something. We both think that with your help we're able to reach him. I see. Sasuke mused as he went over the information he just received. He indeed had an ability that allowed him to access different dimensions, but those were only the ones that Kaguya had conjured up herself. He didn't understand how his specific technique was able to reach Naruto wherever he might be. As interesting as that sounds, I have to decline. Great, let us Minato stopped halfway as he heard what Sasuke said. What? But Sasuke-kun, without your help we can't find that baka. Didn't you want to fight him? Sakura spoke up. Was all Sasuke said as he listened to Sakura's whining. Even after this time she still hadn't changed from her fangirlish tendencies. It's true that I want to fight him. However, after having confronted him he showed me his power, Sasuke said as he resisted the urge to shiver. I need to train first before I will fight him. He clenched his fist. Whatever he did, he's stronger now, much stronger. He revealed, shocking them. Before his revelations and with Kaguya sealed, Naruto was one if not the strongest shinobi alive. With some arguing that Sasuke was his equal. But to hear it from his mouth that he was so strong Sasuke himself needed to train to stand a chance was shocking to say the least. Wait, Kushina spoke up. You said you spoke to Naruto. Did he say what he was here for? Sasuke shook his head. He was wondering that as well as he had shown no interest in returning, yet he still did. No, he did not tell me anything. I see, she murmured with a frown before she schooled her expression. So I take it your answer is no. Sasuke nodded. Yes, I have no interest to look for Naruto before I'm satisfied with my strength. As he finished his sentence he immediately stepped to his right as a golden chain burst out of the ground where he previously stood. From the corner of his eye he spotted a kunai heading his way and quickly moved his head to the left, making it pass him without any trouble. His danger senses went off as he unsheathed his sword and spun around, just in time as with a yellow flash Minato appeared where the kunai was embedded, another one in his hand as they clashed. Jumping back, Sasuke pivoted on his heel. Just in time as he managed to block Kakashi's fist with his own. He then kicked behind him as his heel met Sakura's outstretched fist and grit his teeth slightly at the force behind the punch. Chidori. Current, Sasuke said as lightning discharged outwards into every direction, successfully shocking both Sakura and Kakashi. He was about to flash through hand signs before noticing he wasn't able to move his hands. Glancing down he spotted his shadow was connected to his eyes, followed its source Shikamaru. Kujimane no Jutsu, success. Shikamaru said from where he was hiding. Sasuke spared him a second glance before he began to increase his chakra output, putting a strain on his jutsu. Just as Shikamaru was about to end the jutsu he was saved as two chains wrapped themselves around both Sasuke's arms and hands. Sasuke tugged his arms and noticed how secure they were. Ino, now, Shikamaru commanded, and Sasuke looked at where the blonde was before smirking slightly. Hi, Shintenshi. She wasn't allowed to finish as Sasuke suddenly disappeared from his spot in between Kushina's chains. He appeared behind her before knocking her out with a simple hit to the back of her head. The rest of the shinobi looked confused at Sasuke's sudden appearance and Kushina called back her chains. The moment she did, it revealed several crumbled pieces of rock. Kawarimi. They all thought before quickly dismissing that thought as Kushina had his hands wrapped up. Amenatejikara. Sasuke thought to himself, seeing their confused looks. He made a tiger seal and created 4 clones before they all went through a set of hand seals. Kaden. Gokaku no Jutsu. All 4 of his clones, and he himself exclaimed. The remaining shinobi all went on guard, only for it to turn in confusion as the 4 clones aimed their jutsu towards the sky. The real Sasuke, however, aimed his fireball towards them, causing them all to jump away lest they be hit. Now I just need to stall them for a few minutes. Rasengan. Sasuke's eyes widened as it came from behind him. His eyes quickly changing into the Mangekyo as a rib cage formed around him, successfully defending him from the attack. Sensing a large chakra buildup from around him, he increased the chakra sent to his eyes as his Susanoo grew in size. Just in time, as well as shortly thereafter, a barrage of jutsus were sent his way. Sweden. Daibikufu no Jutsu. Doden. Tsuchi Nami no Jutsu. Fuden. Senpuken. The jutsu clashed against his Susanoo as he was hit from all sides. A large amount of dust picked up as it completely covered the area around him. Slowly the dust dissipated as it revealed Sasuke, who was still in pristine condition. He cast his eyes upwards and saw that the sky had begun to darken as multiple clouds had started to appear. Calling back his Susanoo, he was about to continue his plan but was interrupted as Hinata appeared before him. Her eyes were cold and her mouth set in a tin line before she lashed out. Hake Rokujuyan Sho, Hinata exclaimed before her hands lashed out. Her hands were a blur as Sasuke did his best to defend against her attack that came at speeds he didn't expect from her. Finishing her attack, Hinata jumped back, an arrogant smirk on her face as she looked on. Her smirk disappeared, however, as Sasuke began to channel large amount of chakra to his closed tenketsu, successfully opening them. Flexing his limbs, he moved off with speed Hinata could barely keep up with as he hit her on the side of the head with enough force to knock her out. Kage Bunshin. Sasuke created another clone, this one to keep them busy as he made his way on top of a large stone pillar he occupied before he was approached by the leaf shinobi. Kakashi was busy distracting Sasuke's clone, which was stronger than he had originally thought, as he felt a fist impact his chest. He grunted slightly before he lashed out with a downwards kick that was blocked but still managed to push him back a few feet. Kakashi and Sasuke made eye contact and then simultaneously went through a series of hand seals. The sound of chirping of birds was heard, getting them all to look at them as they both held a chidori in their hand. Both ran towards each other with their jutsu active. Just as they were about to reach the other, Minato flashed behind Sasuke's clone, surprising it and stabbing it through the chest with a wind-laced kunai. The sound of thunder got their attention as they all looked at where Sasuke was standing. His hand was held upwards with a chidori active. A stream of electricity reaching all the way upwards into the clouds. Kushina, get them to safety. Minato yelled towards his wife as he sensed the incredible amount of chakra that was being used. Kushina nodded her head as she, along with the remaining conscious members, grabbed those that had fallen and brought them close. Once they did that, Kushina released more chains from her body, covering all of them with the exception of Minato, who had a tri-pronged kunai ready. Minato watched as a large dragon of pure lightning peeked through the clouds. He hadn't heard of a jutsu like this, so he figured it must be a personal made one. Sasuke said nothing as he merely glanced down at where the shinobi were at. Then without a warning he slashed downwards, the large dragon following his movements. Kirin. Minato, seeing Sasuke lowering his hand, immediately sprung into action as he held on of his kunai in front of him. A large sealing script began to leak out and appear on midair. The lightning dragon was stopped in its track the moment it came in contact with the kanji and began to get sucked inwards. Minato had his eyes closed as to not be blinded by the light it gave off. Feeling the attack completely sucked up, he swiped his kunai to his right as seconds later a large explosion was heard. Tremors that were being felt even from their distance. Hiraishin. Durai. Minato intoned as the tremors slowly died down. Looking upwards, he spotted the spot Sasuke previously occupied was now empty and let loose a sigh. Moments later, the chains Kushina used to cover herself along with the rest were called back. Minato-kun, what happened? Kushina asked her husband as she looked around. Minato released a sigh. He managed to escape when I was redirecting his attack. It was just a distraction to flee. He informed those that were still conscious. So we've failed then. Troublesome. Shikamaru commented. Indeed, he managed to hold of all off with ease. What do you mean, Minato-san? Sakura inquired. It seemed we had a good chance. Minato spared the pink-haired girl a glance. Sasuke could have easily killed most of us if he wanted. He held back a lot and still managed to escape. That technique he used to knock out the Yamanaka would be enough to defeat most of us. Minato informed her as his mind thought back to the technique he used to escape Kushina's chains. It was fast, very fast. More like instant teleportation version of Kawarimi, which if that was true he was even faster than he was. Let's wake them up so we can head back and report this as a failure. Minato told them as he didn't want to worry over the possibilities. Naruto released a heavy breath as he finished up another part of the large ceiling array that he was busy with. Numerous bottles of ink sat next to him as he still had the brush in his hands. He was currently in a completely empty room bar himself. It was the room Yusaka had assigned him to create the seal. Right now it looked like a large circle with stripes branching off of it. If one would look closer, however, they would notice that those stripes were made up from many different kanji placed closely together. It was a very intricate seal despite it not looking as such. A sudden knock at the door got his attention as he rose from his kneeling position and headed over to the door. Opening it, he was immediately met with a hug from his daughter. "Hey Kuno-chan, what's up?" He hugged the smaller girl back. "Ka-san wanted to speak with you too, san." Naruto raised one of his eyebrows at that. "Really now? Did she say why?" He felt her shaking her head. "Very well, let's see what Yusaka-chan wants to speak with me for." Naruto entered the room he sensed Yusaka was in and spotted her looking at him with conflicting emotions. "Yusaka-chan, is everything alright?" He immediately asked upon seeing her. She opened and closed her mouth a few times before she was able to speak. "Naruto-kunai." She didn't get to finish as Naruto suddenly appeared before her with his back facing her. "You, who are you?" he demanded as he glared at the black-haired woman that suddenly appeared inside the room. Killing intent was leaking off of him as he glared at her with his blood-red eyes. She was strong, he knew that much as he could feel the aura she had around her. "Answer me," he demanded once more as he released more of his power. Slowly cracks began to form on the walls and the floor. He could feel Yusaka was about to reach him before the black-haired woman glanced at her, stopping her in her tracks. "If you're not going to answer me, I take it you're an enemy." For a split second he accessed Rakudo mode as his power output skyrocketed and the woman before him froze for a moment. Her eyes widened as she realized what she just did. He was glad Yusaka stood behind him, or else she would have been subjected to the same feeling of his aura as the strange woman before him did. "Naruto-kun, calm down," he heard Yusaka say as her arms wrapped around his waist. Slowly he did what she asked but kept his eyes on the woman as sweat dripped from her forehead. "Thank you Yusaka-chan," the woman said before she berated herself for stuttering. She eyed the male before her warily as he had released enough power to freeze her in her tracks. Hearing the familiarity at which she called his mate's name, he reined in all of his ki but kept her behind him in a protective position. Something the woman noticed as she smiled slightly at that display. "Yusaka-chan, who is she and how does she know you?" Naruto asked the vixen who still had her arms around him. "She's Amaterasu, Naruto-kun," she revealed, causing his eyes to widen. Inside the seal, Kurama had the same reaction as to what he was just told. The woman before him was a goddess. A real one. He knew the yokai were good acquaintances with the Shinto factions, but he never would have thought that it went this far. "I see. My apologies Lady Amaterasu, but I wasn't sure if you were friendly or an enemy threatening Yusaka-chan." Yusaka was about to scold her mate for saying her name so casually but was beaten by Amaterasu, who spoke up. "That's fine Naruto-kun. It was partly my fault as I told Yusaka not to inform you of me," she said with a small smile. "Though, despite her description, I'm still shocked by your appearance. Not to mention the amount of power you hold." She wasn't going to say it out loud, but the amount of power she had felt from him for a split second surpassed anything she had felt before. "So, what brings you here, or did you just want to meet me?" Naruto asked the deity before a golden glow appeared behind him and a very expensive-looking chair showed itself. As he sat down, Amaterasu narrowed her eyes at the ability he just showed. It was very similar to another ability she had read about, though the user of it had apparently gone missing over a couple centuries ago. Yusaka and Amaterasu both sat down on the chairs that were already present before she spoke up. "Oh, I'm just curious to meet the person who stole Yusaka-chan's heart," the goddess said with a certain glint in her eyes both caught. "I mean, it only took her a couple decades, but she finally found someone for herself. I have to say Yusaka-chan has outdone herself." She eyed him up and down. Outdone herself indeed. Yusaka blushed slightly before glaring at the woman whose smirk widened just a fraction. "Though I wonder how old are you?" Naruto shared a glance with Yusaka, who nodded her head. 18 soon to be 19, why? Oh, nothing, I never imagined Yusaka-chan to be a cradle robber. Yusaka sputtered. What? Amaterasu-sama. Yusaka-chan, how many times do you have to say that there's no need for the sama stuff? The goddess pouted. Is she for real? Naruto thought as he looked at her with an unreadable expression on his face. It seems like it, though I never expected her to be so childish. Naruto and Kurama said at the same time. You know, you've been quiet the past few days, Kurama. Well, what do you want me to do? I only woke up after I sensed the ki and power you were releasing recently. Kurama said. Oh, nothing, just wondering. Though if you want you could get out of the seal as long as you leave your chakra inside, you know that, right? Single quote. Damn you. Naruto chuckled softly at his tenant, which got the attention of the other two. Something funny, Naruto-kun? He shook his head. Sorry, Yusaka-chan, I just remembered something, he said as he waved her off. Yusaka kept her eyes on him for a moment before she shrugged. Which is? Amaterasu inquired, which prompted him to look at her with a raised eyebrow. Sorry, what? I asked what it was that you remembered. Oh, that, it's nothing too important. Just something with an annoying furball and stuff. Speaking of which, do you need to talk to me about anything specific? I mean, Kuno is doing God knows what and I don't like leaving her alone. He glanced between the two women. Yusaka shook her head. No, I don't. What about you? She looked at Amaterasu, who surprisingly nodded her head. I do have something I want to talk with Naruto-kun about. Can we do that first then so you two can have the rest of the day to yourselves? He and Amaterasu looked at Yusaka, who shrugged at the two. Naruto gave her a smile as he stood up before walking over and pecking her on the lips. After this I will want to show you something that will hopefully help you spend more time with our daughter, he said before he backed away from her and motioned for Amaterasu to follow her. So, what is it that you wanted to talk to me about? Naruto asked with a lazy smile. Amaterasu, however, looked very serious as her power spiked, snapping him out of his state. Don't worry, I already placed a barrier around us, Uzumaki Naruto, she spoke. Naruto was about to ask how she knew his full name before she spoke up again. How I know your name? I know a lot about you, Uzumaki Naruto, reincarnation of Asura. I know that you're not from around here. In fact, I know that you originate from the elemental nations where you managed to seal the goddess Kagaya. Naruto stared at her with a serious expression on his face. Not really bothered by the power she was releasing. What? That's unexpected. So, what now? I doubt you're here to inform me of just that. Though I'm curious as to how you know that. Now, nothing. She looked at the brief moment of disbelief that flashed across his face. I won't do anything. I see how happy Yusaka is with you. Not to mention Kuno, who seemed to be very attached to you. No shit, she's my daughter. It would do no good if I were to do anything that would make Yusaka upset. She had been waiting for decades to find someone she could love and start a family with, so I won't ruin that. Naruto raised his hand to interrupt her. You're implying she would no longer love me once she learned of the truth. Am I? Is there a reason why you haven't told her of your past? Not really. I was planning to, but I never really got to it. Now I am wondering how you found all of that out. Amaterasu giggled. On the day of your birth, Namikaze Minato summoned the Shinigami to seal the Kyuubi inside of you. The Shinigami originates from this world, you know. The elemental nations has lots of connections to this world. Or do you think the fact that techniques of those dojutsu being named after us gods is just a coincidence? Seeing his surprised look, she continued. Since your birth you've been marked by the Shinigami. That seal on your stomach. It alerted the Shinigami himself the moment you stepped into this world. You're lucky he has taken an interest in you. Something about your ancestor or whatnot. She shrugged. He never told me exactly what it was, though from the look on your face you know. I'm not going to pry as it doesn't really concern me. Just know that I want Yusaka to be happy and won't allow you to ruin it. You know, you're like an overprotective parent or something. Inside the seal, Kurama slapped his paws against his face as he heard his jailer's comment. I'm no such thing. Yusaka is just a good friend of mine, as she's never been so happy as she is now with you and Kuno, and I want it to last for as long as possible. I know you're strong, very strong after having felt your power when your body glowed for a moment, but that was enough for me to know that you are far beyond Yusaka. Even if she were to use the ley lines. So I'm just curious, what keeps you here, Uzumaki Naruto? What keeps me here, you ask? The fact that everything I ever wanted is here. A person to love and a daughter to spoil. I'm an orphan myself, so having my own family is everything I ever wanted, and I won't let anyone ruin that, not even you. He unleashed his bloodlust in a similar way as he did with Sasuke and watched as she froze. You felt that? That is the result from my suffering at the hands of a bunch of fools. You should be glad, as if it wasn't for Yusaka or Kuno you can bet it'd be much worse. The more I spend time with them, the more they heal me of my pain I have suffered. He looked at her with pain-filled eyes as she had come down from the bloodlust he radiated. So tell me, are you satisfied by my answer? Amaterasu nodded her head after listening to him. I am. I will let you look for your daughter now whilst I spend some time with Yusaka. Good. By the way, are you aware that the biblical god is dead? I was wondering, since you're from the Shinto faction. Her eyes widened slightly as she heard his question. How do you know? It's supposed to be one of the best kept secrets in the supernatural. Naruto shrugged. I have my ways. Anyway, I'm going to look for my daughter. Tell Yusaka I'll be there for dinner. With that he left, shattering the barrier she had put up without any problem as he spared her no second glance. Amaterasu watched him leave and couldn't help but be curious as to what he will do next. From what little he said, she knew that he would never even think of putting either Yusaka or Kuno in danger, but everyone else seemed fair play to him. Naruto walked through the busy streets of Kyoto, his eyes lingering on some of the many sakura trees that were spread throughout the city. The sun was shining down upon him as he continued his walk, passing by numerous women each clad in kimonos who were looking at him with something akin to lust. He didn't pay them much attention though, as he put his hands into the pocket of the jacket he was wearing, his eyes moving from left to right as he tried to look for Kuno. He should have made a clone or something to look after her while he was speaking with Amaterasu and Yusaka. Suddenly he felt a familiar pulse of chakra coming from not too far away. Immediately he took off, running at speeds that made him invisible to the regular person. The energy he felt was from the necklace he had given Kuno. Powered by her chakra, it would only activate when Kuno was panicking. Channeling more chakra to his feet, his speed increased exponentially as passers-by would feel a breeze when he passed them. Let me go, you meanie. He heard the voice of his daughter as he neared her. Can someone please shut her up? A male voice grumbled. Someone bypassed the barrier I set up. A second male voice spoke up. What? Go check it out. I'll make sure she shuts up. Got it, B. The man didn't get to finish as a malicious aura hit him like a ton of bricks. BB boss, he weakly said as he managed to turn his head, only to immediately regret it as he stared straight into blood-red eyes that looked at him with such hate. The aura increased in intensity as the other men present froze up. The necklace around Kuno's neck began to give off a soft green glow, protecting her from the horrible aura Naruto was releasing. Who or you? One of them said. Behind the man were 3 pairs of black feathered wings as he tried to keep himself standing. Tu-san, Kuno said in joy as she looked at her father. Tu-san, one of them repeated. This boy is your father. Naruto's eyes softened as they landed on the bound form of his daughter before they hardened as he gave each of them a glare that was supported by his bloodlust. Masumi, how about you close your eyes for a moment so that Tu-san can take care of the bad people? Why you? Take care of us? Ha, don't make me laugh. The 6-winged fallen spoke arrogantly. Kuno did what she was told and closed her eyes. The aura the necklace gave off helping her calm down. Silence, trash. His words shut him up as they held such a commanding tone to them he couldn't help but obey. I don't know who sent you or whatever faction you are from, but to lay a hand on my daughter, his aura spiked to a level none of the fallen had ever felt. I will erase each of you from this earth. He had barely finished speaking when he was after the man closest to him, his hand holding the back of his head before he slammed him face first into the ground. A crater formed as Naruto increased the hold on the man's head before. Funsuken, Naruto said softly as he punched the man straight through his ribcage and piercing his heart from the back with a steam-enhanced punch. Before they realized one of them was killed, Naruto was already busy with the second one. He lashed out twice, both times with enough force to break his arms from the elbow down. As the man's arms hung loosely, he kicked him with enough force to break his shins as the sound of bones breaking traveled through the alley they were in. Naruto didn't pay any attention as the man was whimpering in pain as he lashed out with his feet, his heel colliding with the man's neck, instantly killing him as the man's neck snapped in an angle it wasn't supposed to. Finally snapping out of their shock, they readied themselves to attack as they each prepared a spear of light. Naruto merely watched as they threw them before catching them with no difficulty. With a quick burst of speed he appeared before a 2-winged fallen and rammed both spears through his hands deep into the street they were standing on. I am possible, the impaled man said as he did his best not to scream out in pain from the two light spears that were stuck in his hands. Taking a deep breath, he began to mold the chakra before expelling a highly corrosive gas from his mouth onto the body of the man beneath him. Ichiraku, he intoned as he watched the skin of the man melt off of his body before the bones joined as well, leaving nothing behind. A clone suddenly appeared behind one of the men that looked at the scene with disgust. Gah! Blood escaped his lips as he glanced down to see a spiraling ball of energy protruding from his chest. The clone suddenly popped, causing the Rasengan to become unstable and explode, successfully bisecting the man. As the clone killed its target, Naruto glanced at the remaining fallen. The man looked frightened as he backed up as much as he could. Despite having more wings than his companions, he knew that he stood no chance against the monster before him. Naruto's eyes seemed to glow as he neared him. Please, spare me, the man begged as his back hit the wall. You touching my daughter has forfeited you of any right to live, Naruto said as he held his hand out. A Rasengan began to form before it was joined by another hand. Slowly a screeching noise was heard as multiple wind blades began to stick out from the Rasengan. Then, just as he was about to throw it, he was interrupted. Naruto-kun no, Yusaka yelled as she ran towards him. She let out a sigh in relief as he lowered his hand and slowly his attack began to dissipate. She sensed the amount of power in the attack and it would have killed the man the moment it would have touched him. Yusaka, they tried to kidnap our daughter, Naruto said to his mate as he kept his eyes on him in case he tried to run. I know Naruto-kun, she said as she grabbed his hand. But if you kill him we might never know who sent them after her. Naruto looked at her for a moment before giving a slight nod as he walked over to where Kuno was. She still had her eyes closed and her fingers over her ears. Thank you, the man said weakly as he looked at the blonde woman. I wasn't sure what would happen to me if you didn't stop him. Don't thank me yet, Yusaka said as her voice was cold as she unleashed her own ki on the shivering man. I only spared you to find out who sent you after my daughter. Whoever it is will face the consequences for trying to kidnap the daughter of the ruler of Kyoto. The man's fear returned tenfold at hearing that. Why your daughter? The man whispered before he passed out. Guards, take him in and put him in a well-guarded cell and someone to clean up the bodies. Also, give me the names of those that were supposed to be guarding the city for danger. She commanded as two armored yokai walked up to the fallen and put restraining cuffs on his hands, stopping them from using any of their power. As she watched them take the man away, a frown formed itself before she walked over to where Naruto was sitting with Kuno in his lap. He was hugging her closely as she heard Kuno letting out silent sobs. It's okay Kuno-chan, he repeated as he kept holding her. Hey, he said softly as Yusaka sat next to him. She leant her head on his shoulder before leaning into his warmth as her eyes softened as she looked at her daughter. How did you know what was going on? He asked after a moment of silence. I could feel your spike in power all the way from inside of my office. I immediately headed towards here just in time to stop you from killing that man. Naruto hummed at her words before glancing down at the now sleeping form of Kuno. I want to know how they managed to not only enter but almost succeed in kidnapping Kuno in broad daylight, Naruto said as he looked directly at her. Don't worry, I will allow them to have their fun with the man till he speaks. Naruto nodded, satisfied with her answer. Good. Can you arrange a meeting with Azazel? He should be the leader of the fallen angels, no? Correct. But are you sure? You will be known throughout the supernatural if we do that. Naruto gave her a firm nod. I don't care. That man better explain why I caught his members trying to kidnap our daughter or I'll kill him on the spot and allow someone more competent to take his place. Kuno's safety is more important than me being unknown to the supernatural, and I will remove anyone that will attempt to hurt either of you, consequences be damned. He said with such conviction it warmed her heart. That is really nice to hear, she murmured into his shoulder, and they stayed like that for a while. Come, let's get back home and put Kuno in bed. I'll show you the technique I told you earlier about while we're there. He stood up, carefully not to wake Kuno, with Yusaka following his example. She interlinked her hand with his free one as the two headed home. So you're telling me you failed your mission and Sasuke managed to escape each of you? Tsunade asked as she watched the group before her. Minato, Kushina and Kakashi nodded their heads. Hi Hokage-sama, Sasuke showed no interest in returning for now at least. You make it sound like he would have wanted to. That's correct. Sasuke had confirmed it was indeed Naruto he had spoken to. Unfortunately he didn't know why Naruto was here either, as he had not told him anything. From what he told us, it was clear they had some sort of confrontation, which annoyed Sasuke as he said Naruto was too strong for him at the moment. He is apparently looking for a place to get stronger before he was going to confront Naruto again. Therefore we understand that once he gains satisfactory strength he will search us out, as we have the foundation set up in order to reach Naruto. Tsunade closer her eyes in thought as she interlinked her fingers before opening them. I see. I guess that's better than nothing. Now, how strong do you think Sasuke is after what he had shown? The three exchanged some glances before Kakashi spoke up. Honestly, Tsunade-sama, we doubt there is anyone currently alive that is stronger than him, with the exception of Naruto, that is. Sasuke has shown numerous techniques neither we had heard of that might have something to do with the Rinnegan he had received. He has a technique that is faster than Minato's Hiraishin and was able to block Sakura's fists with little problem. Not to forget his chakra capacity is through the roof. The only one that is capable of defeating him at the moment is Naruto, who is nowhere to be found. Tsunade released a sigh. I see, I will update his rank in the bingo book. Aside from that there isn't much we can do except for sending out Anbu to look for him and bring him back. I know what you want to say, but without him there is no chance of reaching Naruto. We're lucky the daimyo has calmed down slightly after the large investment we received not too long ago, or I would have sent everyone available after him. We understand, Hokage-sama. If it's possible, me and Kushina want to join the Anbu search parties every now and then. Minato offered with a smile to his wife. That's acceptable. Anything else? Actually, Tsunade-sama, I'm wondering what will happen once we find Naruto. Sasuke managed to fend us off pretty easily while holding back, and even he admitted Naruto is stronger than him. Kakashi asked with both Minato and Kushina turned to her, they too curious as to what her answer was. To be honest, if it wasn't for the daimyo I wouldn't even bother trying to get him to return. She spotted the shocked look Minato and Kushina gave her. No, that would be a lie. Perhaps it's selfish of me, but I just want to see him again. Give him a proper goodbye and wish him happiness wherever he might be. Of course there's also you two. She pointed at the couple. Who want to meet their son. I'm pretty sure you want to see him once more as well, Kakashi. Said man averted his eyes downwards at her words. I also have a lot of questions that only he can answer. So for now we'll update Sasuke's bingo book page while I'll send Anbu to look for him. I suggest you go and train yourself so you might surprise him if you meet again. Naruto and Yusaka stood in the doorway of Kuno's bedroom. Their eyes focused on the sleeping form of their daughter, both with fond smiles on their faces. Has that man said anything yet? Naruto asked Yusaka as he felt her lean into him. No, sorry Naruto-kun. She nuzzled her head against him. It's okay. If he doesn't want to speak I might visit him myself. I'm not really good at interrogation, but I think I can make an exception for him. What about those that were supposed to make sure something like today shouldn't have happened? Was nobody guarding the city? Don't worry, I have brought those in for questioning as well. I will make sure to find out if they were merely slacking off or if it is something else. Regardless, I will assign some of my more trusted guards to keep an eye on them. Naruto nodded, seemingly satisfied by her words. Naruto, you know how Konoha has an invisible barrier surrounding it? He heard the voice of Kurama speak from within him. Yes, why? You should try to design something similar so it would send out an alarm to either you, Yusaka, or someone trusted whenever someone of a different faction enters the city perimeters. That is a very good idea. Hey, Yusaka, she hummed. What do you think about a large invisible barrier that would surround Kyoto and would send out a signal every time and someone unknown that isn't a human entered? Sounds interesting. Why? What if I told you I can create one? I would obviously have to put my other project on hold, but it's definitely worth it in my opinion. Especially to protect her. He glanced at the sleeping form of Kuno. You can. That'd be very handy if possible, Yusaka murmured as she went over the possibilities. She turned to face him. I want you to create it. Your other project can wait, as this one is more important. Both for us and anyone foolish to try something like this again. Her expression darkened slightly at the end. Anyway, he grasped her hand in his own. Enough of this gloomy mood. I was planning on showing you a technique that would allow you to spend more time with both Kuno and myself, so let's go. He was about to take a step before he abruptly stopped, getting a confused glance from her. I'm not going to leave her alone after what happened, so I might as well show you what I'll be teaching you. He explained as he saw her expression. Yusaka watched as he brought both the index and middle finger of both hands together, forming a plus sign. Kage Bunshin, he said, and Yusaka watched as a second Naruto appeared out of nowhere. Clone, Yusaka said as she looked at the second Naruto. Circling it, she stared at him intently, her eyes wandering up and down before she reached out and touched it. She was surprised as she ran her fingers over the clothes it was wearing and noticed it was made from the same fabric as the real Naruto wore. Satisfied, the clone said with a small smirk as Yusaka jumped slightly at its voice before looking at the real him. With this you can let it take care of any paperwork while the real you can spend more time with Kuno. I know that it looks like she likes me more than you, but that's mainly due to you being so busy with your job. Now, are you interested in learning this? Yusaka looked at him before shifting her eyes to his clone and back to him before she nodded. Good, let's go somewhere with more space. I leave the clone to watch after her. He grabbed her hand as he led her to an empty field away from any humans. Okay, now I want you to make the same hand sign as I showed you. Yusaka did what he told her. Now, I want you to focus your chakra towards your fingers. Once you do that, I need you to imagine yourself. After that, I need you to expel the chakra you collected outwards from where your fingers are. Just a warning that you might feel weaker than normal after successfully creating a clone, as it will have half of your power. Kage Bunshin, Yusaka said as she released the buildup of chakra outwards and a puff of smoke appeared. Waving his hand with small amount of wind chakra, the smoke disappeared and revealed Yusaka's clone. It looked somewhat close to the real one, except it was hunched over and looked very pale. Naruto smacked the clone, causing it to dispel and Yusaka to stiffen for a second before she looked at Naruto. I see you discovered one of the purposes of the clone. She nodded her head. Good, as you received its memories, didn't you? Another nod. The Kage Bunshin sends its memories back to its creator upon dispelling, making it ideal to use for reading or filling out paperwork. You can see now how it will come in handy, nay. He smiled cheekily at her. Try it again, except this time channel a bit more chakra to your hands. He said as he watched her make the hand sign before another with another puff of smoke another clone appeared. This one stood slightly straighter but still had an unhealthy pale skin tone. He popped it before motioning her to do it again as he made himself comfortable and sat underneath the shade provided by a large tree, getting her to look at him with a scowl. Hey, this might take a while, so I might as well get comfortable. He said with a smirk. Don't worry though, as it took me an hour to learn this technique and back then I had terrible chakra control, so I wager you'll have it down soon. Yusaka gave him a glance before she looked at her sickly looking clone and dispelled it. While she was busy, he closed his eyes and slowed his breathing as he tried to enter sage mode. Arg! His yell alerted Yusaka, who stopped what she was doing and hurried over to him. As she neared him, she saw he was breathing heavily as his eyes began to water. What was that? It hurts so much, he asked himself. He tried to enter sage mode only to be assaulted by most malicious aura he had felt in his life. Even the Kyuubi, when he first met him, didn't even came close as he unknowingly clenched his fist to control himself. Naruto, what you experienced was the evil intent that is on this world from all the wars. Coupled with how humans have mechanized as made nature itself impure. It's why you have no problem accessing sage mode in the elemental nations, as they are less technologically advanced despite having had multiple wars, Kurama explained. I see, does this mean I can only use SOSP mode, as I had no problems when I briefly accessed it? No, you can still enter sage mode, you just have to be prepared. The only reason this happened was because you were caught off guard. That's good to know, he replied before he opened his eyes and looked into the concerned eyes of Yusaka, who was holding his hands. Naruto-kun, are you okay? She immediately asked upon seeing him open his eyes. He smiled at her as he brought her hand to his face and kissed her knuckles. Yes, I am. Sorry for worrying you, Yusaka-chan. He apologized. What happened? You had your eyes closed before you suddenly screamed out in pain. He looked at her for a minute before mentally shrugging. Well, I don't know if you know this, but I'm able to use senjutsu. He revealed, shocking her. And I was attempting to enter sage mode but wasn't prepared for the amount of evil this world holds. Yusaka was shocked to learn that her mate was capable of using senjutsu. Even among yokai, a senjutsu practitioner was rare, and to hear that a human's capable of using it was quite surprising. Though, the last part confused her. Naruto-kun, what do you mean when you said, this world? She saw his eyes widen for a moment, but it was enough to know he was hiding something. He opened his mouth to speak but then closed it. Damn, he kind of fucked himself over, so he might as well come clean. Placing his hand on her shoulder, they dematerialized into golden particles that were scattered into the wind. Reappearing into their bedroom, Yusaka stumbled for a moment. Not used to that manner of travel. Naruto sat down on their bed before patting the spot next to him. Looking at it, she shrugged before she sat down next to him and turned to face him, gold eyes meeting red. Well, I was planning on telling you later, but now that it had slipped out, it wouldn't hurt to inform you, while I will also tell you off my past. He took a deep breath as he began his story of his past and how he ended up here. Hours later, Naruto and Yusaka were seen lying on their bed, his head resting in her lap as her soft fingers ran through his hair. She had listened in complete silence as he told her of his past, not once interrupting. Aside from the occasional gasp of shock when he revealed the existence of another world connected to theirs and the fact that despite his age he had already fought in a war. Or the occasional sniffing noise she made when he revealed more of his rough and graphic details of his childhood. Somehow during the story they had changed into the position they were currently in. Not that they minded it though, as it allowed them comfort in the other's touch. Thank you for telling me that, Naruto-kun. Yusaka spoke up, breaking the silence in the room. It must be hard to open up like that after everything that has happened. She finished softly. Naruto silently agreed, though he felt a lot better now that he had told her about it, like a sudden weight was removed from his person. Naruto suddenly moved himself from her lap before and wrapped his arms around her before pulling her on top of him. Yusaka was caught off guard by his sudden move but didn't get to voice her shock as her lips met his and she slowly gave into the kiss. It's good to see you still love me even after keeping my past from you, he said once they broke off the kiss. Yusaka rested her head in the crook of his neck and laughed softly. I don't think I could hate you for something like that. You kept it a secret because you were afraid and I can't fault you for that. One of her hands entered his jacket and trailed over his muscled chest. Not to mention the happiness you've brought me and Kuno far outweighs any hostility I could ever have for you. She felt him increase his hold on her as she said those words. I wonder what I've done to earn someone like you. She heard him murmur into her ears. She giggled, a noise that sounded beautiful in his ears. He wouldn't mind staying like this for the rest of the day if he could. It wasn't to be though, as Yusaka suddenly sat up, straddling him. Her hands placed on his chest as she gave him a very sexy smirk. Yusaka. Yes, she purred out. He felt a shiver travel through his body as he heard her voice. As much as I want to do what you're thinking about, shouldn't we wait for tonight as it's getting late and Kuno will probably wake up soon? Despite his words, his hands moved their way upwards before they were placed on her hips. Oh, she made a cross sign with her fingers as a puff of smoke appeared next to them. To his surprise, a perfect copy of Yusaka stepped out. The clone looked at its creator with somewhat of a glare before it exited the room, grumbling something about fairness. A smug smile etched itself on Yusaka's face as she looked down at his surprised look. Didn't expect that, no, Yusaka said as she leaned down till their faces were mere centimeters apart. Naruto leaned up, smashing his lips against hers in a hungry, lust-filled kiss. Not wasting time, Yusaka returned the kiss as she pushed her tongue into his mouth, something he allowed her as he massaged the wet appendage with his own tongue. Breaking the kiss, Naruto stared at her glazed eyes. Her breathing already had gotten heavier. Looking her over once more, he shrugged to himself. Their clones could handle Kuno whenever she was going to wake up. So a bit of fun with the horny vixen on top of him wouldn't hurt. An hour later, the door leading to their bedroom opened as Yusaka stepped out, followed closely behind by Naruto. Both their hair was disheveled as they both sporting satisfied smiles. That was nice. Naruto spoke up with Yusaka agreeing as she tried to straighten up her hair. As they walked, they could hear voices coming from the direction coupled with Kuno's laughter of the kitchen and headed in that direction. Arriving, they spotted Yusaka's clone cooking dinner while his own seemed to be conversing with Kuno, who was seated at the table. Hearing footsteps heading in her direction, Kuno stopped working on her drawing in favor for watching who was approaching. She was shocked as she watched her parents walk towards her. But that was impossible, right? Her father and mother were already here. So who were they? She glanced at her father, who was sitting next to her, or was that someone else? Naruto and Yusaka spotted the various emotions that ran across her face before he quickly calmed her down. Relax, Masumi, he said in a calming manner which helped. T2-san, Ka-san. Kuno asked, unsure of herself as she kept glancing at the corner of her eyes at the copy of her father sitting next to her. Yes, Kuno, Yusaka spoke. Who? She wasn't able to understand how there were two of them. She only had one mother and father, didn't she? So why were there two of them now? They chuckled slightly at her confusion. Don't worry, Kuno. Those two, Yusaka pointed at his and her own copies, are clones of us. Naruto-kun showed me this technique so we can spend more time together, isn't that great? Yusaka said happily. It didn't take long before she was almost tackled to the ground by a small blonde blur as Kuno hugged her. Naruto looked at his clone before it dispelled himself, sending back the memory of when she woke up and what had happened since then. The memory it seems to damage had come to Kuno as she was still her cheerful self from before. As he turned around he managed to catch Yusaka's clone pouting as it wasn't allowed to dispel. They walked back over to the table and sat down with Kuno in between them as they watched what she was drawing. Occasional laughter coming from one of them as they talked. A man in his early 20s could be seen relaxing. He had black hair with blonde bangs and a small goatee. His feet were placed on the desk as he was busy reading a small orange book. A perverted giggle would escape his lips every now and then. Whomever wrote these books is a genius, he thought as he turned over a page. Suddenly the door opened as gruff-looking middle-aged man with black hair and a matching beard entered. Still reading those books, Azazel? The man asked as he looked at the giggling younger male. Of course Barakiel, these books are true works of art. Whomever this toad sage is knows how to write his stuff. The now named Azazel replied as he kept his eyes on the book. Barakiel shook his head at his friend before he pulled out a letter from his jacket. Azazel, I think you might want to see this. His voice was serious and caused Azazel to stop reading his book in favor of looking at the man. He held his hand out, motioning him to hand over the letter. Yokai, Azazel wondered as he looked at the wax seal that was on the envelope. Shrugging, he opened the envelope and retrieved the letter that was inside before unfolding it and read it out loud. Azazel Dono, this letter to inform you that recently a kidnapping attempt was made on my daughter, Kuno. The perpetrators of the attempt revealed to be of your faction and you are hereby invited to discuss the repercussions of the failed kidnapping attempt 1 week from when this letter will arrive. You are allowed to bring one person with you. Failure to meet me will be seen as a sign of aggression on behalf of your faction and will be met with immediate retaliation. Current ruler of Kyoto, Yusaka. What is it? Barakiel asked upon noticing the frown on his friend's face. Instead of replying, Azazel handed over the letter to Barakiel, whose expression quickly mirrored his. This is concerning, Barakiel commented as Azazel nodded. Indeed, it's also worrying to notice that if it wasn't for this letter we would have not even known that someone made an attempt to kidnap her child. Even with the multiple spies spread through the world, this is news to me. Barakiel nodded. It means that they have been increasing their security and making sure the news doesn't come out. I'm curious though as to who tried to kidnap the child. I haven't sent out such an order and I can't see you doing it either. Correct. Hopefully it means that they acted on their own as we are already quite low on numbers and not in a state to start a war with the yokai despite their neutral stance in the supernatural. So who are you going to take with you? Barakiel asked as he looked the letter over where it read he was allowed to take someone with him. I'm not sure. Azazel shrugged. Either you or perhaps my young apprentice. I doubt it will come to war, and even then he is already strong for his age. If anything, this will be a good lesson on how to handle such situations. Regardless though, I still have a few days to think it over. Azazel sat back down in his chair and picked up the orange book he put down earlier. Anyway, I want you and Shemhazai to look over any members that are missing between now and 2 weeks ago. Perhaps we might find some hints as to who and why they wanted to kidnap the child. Barakiel gave a slight bow before he excused himself, leaving Azazel all by himself in the now silent office. A silence that was disturbed by the occasional sounds of giggling that escaped his mouth. Yusaka sat in her office waiting for Azazel to arrive. It had been a week since she had sent a letter out to Grigory inviting Azazel over to talk regarding the attempted kidnapping on her daughter. She had received his reply wherein he stated he would be present 1 week from then, which was today. It was good too as she pretty much forced him to attend lest he want to face the consequences of the actions members of his faction caused. News of the attempted kidnapping of Kuno had spread shortly after she had sent the letter out. Despite her along with Naruto doing the best they could for it to keep within the walls of Kyoto, so to speak. They did manage to remove certain spies from both the Fallen and Devil factions before any of them was able to get any sensitive information. Naruto was still busy designing the correct seals in order to create the barrier they had spoken about. Suddenly the door leading to her office opened as an armored Tengu entered. Yusaka-sama, Azazel Dono and Barakiel Dono have arrived. The Tengu informed her as she looked up at him. She glanced to the side where a clock was hanging and spotted they were on time before glancing back at the waiting man. Very well, allow them inside, will you? The man gave a slight bow as he turned around and closed the door behind him. Shortly after the Tengu left, the door opened again. She saw Azazel enter, followed closely behind by Barakiel. Yusaka-chan, how have you been? Haven't seen you in a while. Azazel cheerfully greeted the vixen who didn't look amused by his greetings. Azazel-san, Barakiel-san, please take a seat. She motioned to the 2 chairs set up in front of her desk. The 2 men did what she told them and noted that her mood was the opposite of Azazel's cheerful one. Sitting down, Azazel gave Yusaka a look over. She looked exactly the same as she did the last time they met, as she was currently clad in a shrine maiden outfit with a haori around it. Behind her were her 9 tails that were each tilted upwards. The same could be said for her fox ears that poked out between her blonde hair that was set in a ponytail with 2 bangs framing her face. "Ah, Yusaka-san, who's the empty chair for?" Barakiel asked the woman as he noticed the empty chair that was placed next to her own. "That one is for the last person that will be joining us," was all she said. She didn't feel like informing them of Naruto's identity. They would find out when he would show himself, so there was no need to tell them everything. Her answer caught the two off guard, as they weren't informed that anyone else aside from them would be joining them in their talks. Whomever this person was must be important to be allowed to sit next to her. Their answer came as the sound of the door opening caught their attention. They all turned to look at the person that entered the room. A male around 18 or 19 walked in with spiky blonde hair which was slicked back aside from the few strands that were covering his forehead. His eyes, which had a color reminiscent of blood, looked at them for a brief moment as he walked past the two towards Yusaka. He was currently clad in a white kimono with numerous tomo circling both the sleeves and collar and a black obi. Coming to a stop next to Yusaka, he bent down till he was on eye level with Yusaka before he, to the shock of both Azazel and Barakiel, kissed her right on her mouth. Their shock increased as they noticed Yusaka kissing back and had her eyes closed. Breaking the kiss, he sat down on the empty chair before giving Yusaka an apologetic smile. "Sorry, Yusaka-chan, I let Kurama out to watch over Kuno." Yusaka gave him a thankful smile as she heard that. She had been introduced to Kurama a few days ago. To say she was shocked when she first looked at the enormous chakra fox would be an understatement. Naruto told her it was Kurama where the power came from that he showed when he first met the council. He was far from weak without him though, which he showed as he easily subdued the large chakra construct with something he called chains of Enkidu. Depending on the chakra Naruto gave the fox when summoning him would determine its size, though, even when in a smaller form, Kurama should be able to handle most threats, and if it came to it, Naruto could instantly give Kurama more power regardless of him not being nearby. Looking at Azazel and Barakiel, she noticed the shocked looks both sported. She couldn't really blame them, as aside from a select few, Yusaka was still single as far as they were concerned. Eyes moved from Yusaka to Naruto before going back to Yusaka, then Naruto and back to Yusaka again. Their expressions asking her to clarify. She cleared her throat. "Ah, Azazel, Barakiel, this is Naruto Uzumaki. He's my mate and Kuno's father." Their eyes widened and eyebrows rose as she revealed that piece of information before they looked at Naruto. He looked to be around 18 or 19, yet he was the father of Yusaka's child. "But he's so young." Azazel couldn't help but comment, with Barakiel nodding in agreement. "Is there a problem with my age?" Naruto spoke up as he looked at Azazel, who suppressed the need to shiver as his blood-red eyes gazed into his own. "Nothing of such, Naruto-san." Azazel waved him off. "It's just that I'm surprised someone of your age already has a child." He hummed. "And who's to say that I'm not older than I look? After all, devils are capable of controlling their appearance despite being several centuries old, no? But you aren't, at least I can't sense any demonic energy coming from you. If anything, the energy you have is similar to that of Yusaka's." "You're correct." He glanced at Yusaka from the corner of his eye and spotted the slight nod she gave. "I'm not a devil, nor am I a yokai either. The correct description would be a human who has special powers. Such as, in this case, I am capable of using chakra instead of what the people of this world normally use." He held out his hand as chakra began to swirl together before it formed into a ball of pure chakra. They could clearly sense the chakra radiating off of it as proof he was telling the truth. Naruto didn't really care he was revealing his ability, as they wouldn't be able to mimic it without knowing the correct steps that were necessary. He was looking forward to teaching Kuno this technique when she got older, partially to see how long she would take to master it. As he let the Rasengan dissipate, his expression turned serious as the mood in the room suddenly shifted. "As interesting me showing my abilities is it is not why you've been called here," Naruto said as he looked between the two men. "Correct," Azazel said as he interlinked his fingers. "In the letter it stated that there was an attempted kidnapping done by members of my faction on your daughter." It was somewhat weird for Azazel to say those words to Naruto instead of Yusaka. "That is correct. Would you mind explaining in detail what had happened?" Barakiel butted. Naruto shrugged. "I left the room where I had a meeting with Yusaka and someone else, as the topics they discussed weren't too important for me to stay and listen. I then went to look for Kuno, who should have been close by but wasn't for some reason. It wasn't until a few minutes of me looking around that I felt her chakra signature and could feel she was distressed. He left out the fact that it was due to the necklace she wore, as it would be good to keep that a secret. I immediately made my way to where I could feel her signature, at which took me a few seconds. As I neared it, I must have bypassed some sort of barrier, as I could hear Kuno's voice and two of the assailants. I entered an alleyway where I saw Kuno, who had her hands bound together. Around her were 5 fallen angels. He ran one of his hands through his blonde hair. It didn't take long for me to see what was going on, so I told Kuno to close her eyes, and once I confirmed she did what I asked her, I began. I dispatched them all easily without any problem till there was just one left. A fallen who had 6 wings and was begging me to spare him. I ignored him, of course, and prepared an attack to finish him off before Yasaka managed to interrupt me and inadvertently save the man from death. I went to check up on Kuno as she got the man arrested in energy-draining cuffs and had a few men escorting him to interrogation. Unfortunately, we were unable to get out of him who sent them after Kuno. Even after everything they tried, he wasn't saying anything. It was weird, really. It was like the memory of their employer was erased from their minds, right? Naruto turned at Yasaka, who nodded her head. Naruto-kun is correct. It seemed like there was a large part of his memory missing. They knew what their job was, yet not who gave it to them, at least not anymore. Azazel and Barakiel exchanged glances with the other as they heard that piece of information before Azazel spoke up. So what do you want me to do? It's clear that their employer is not us, me or Barakiel, as there's no reason for us to want your daughter. Not to mention that our numbers are quite low compared to both angels and devils, so a war or something alike is the last thing we want. Yes, the fact that it wasn't you that had sent them out had eased some of my anger. Naruto said. However, the fact still remains that they were part of your faction. You're their leader and it is expected of you to keep them in line, so you're responsible for not keeping an eye on them. Yasaka spoke up. After having spoken with the council, we decided that we will forbid any fallen angels from entering Kyoto for as long as we feel necessary to. If any of them enter, we will see that as an aggression on your part and either kill or capture them. Yasaka said, shocking the two fallen. Be reasonable, Yasaka, Azazel pleaded with the Kitsune yokai. Banning an entire faction from entering was something unheard of. Angels and devils weren't even banned from entering another's territory. It was just that they would be a fool to do so, and if they ended up getting killed in the process, it was their own fault. Enough. Naruto's voice halted any protest Azazel might have as a sudden increase of pressure was felt in the room. It wasn't choking them or anything, but they could clearly feel it as wisps of golden chakra escaped his body. Unlike demonic energy, it lacked any malicious feeling while keeping the oppressive weight his power held. Regardless of that, he wasn't writing of his ability to potentially add the malicious feeling that belonged with demonic energy. His pupils had turned into slits as he stared at the leader of the fallen angels. They noted that Yasaka seemed unaffected by the sudden increase of pressure and merely looked on. You heard what Yasaka said and you will abide by them. It is non-negotiable, so don't try to test us if you think we are bluffing or your faction might be looking for a new leader. He spoke as he stopped releasing power once he had reached what Azazel could tell was on par with Seraphal, one of the 4 Satans. Azazel was both impressed and slightly frightened with the young man before him as he looked into his now slitted eyes. The amount of power he had released was something he never expected him to have. Not to mention that he was a human of all things. He knew that if it came down to a fight it would be close, but he would end up as the victor. Despite his power being close to his own, he had much more experience than the boy before him had, having fought in a war centuries ago. That, and he was also numerous millennia older. However, the boy before him was only 18 years old yet already had such immense magic, or in his case chakra reserves, making him quite curious as to how strong he would be once he got older. Though there was also the fact that the boy so abruptly stopped the release of his power that made him wonder if he was limiting himself. He obviously had good control of his power, evident by the fact that Yasaka wasn't affected in the slightest, who he knew was the weakest in the room. All of that added up made the boy a wildcard. One with possible abilities and powers that could change a battle should he decide to reveal them. It also made him cautious, as the boy wouldn't have stated that obvious threat in front of 2 of the strongest fallen angels unless he was sure of his victory. One could say he was overconfident, but those eyes of him told Azazel that he knew or had something that would guarantee his victory if it would come down to a fight. Not that he wanted to start a fight. Oh gods, no. He quite enjoyed being alive and wouldn't mind staying alive the next couple millennia if it was up to him. Barakiel didn't like what he had said and was about to retort before a glance of Azazel halted him in his tracks. Very well, Yasaka-san, I will inform my faction that they are no longer welcome in Kyoto for an undisclosed time. Azazel said with a frown. Kyoto was one of the hotspots for members of his faction would go to. It had everything from a good atmosphere, events, food and cute girls for those interested. He had no doubt that despite his warning they would ignore it and visit regardless. Hopefully after just a few deaths they would realize the threat and his warning were real so he wouldn't lose more members of his already small faction. They won't like it but I will do my best to keep them away from Kyoto till they're allowed back. Good. Yusaka nodded her head, satisfied by his answer. That was all I wanted to say, you're free to leave. Yusaka called in the same armored guard from earlier who motioned for both Fallen to follow him as he led them outside. As the door closed behind them Yusaka released a sigh before plopped herself down on Naruto's lap and leaned against him. That went better than expected. She murmured softly as she felt one of his hands run through her hair with his other one wrapped around her waist. Naruto hummed. Indeed, I was expecting Azazel to keep arguing and fight against the verdict you gave him. She giggled. No doubt your little show of power made his decision easier. She turned her head slightly before leaning up and took his lips with her own. Gently nibbling on his bottom lip. She opened her mouth as she felt his tongue tap against her lips and met it with her own as they increased the intensity of the kiss. Right here, Naruto asked her as they broke the kiss. Yusaka gave a nod as she had her eyes half lidded and traced her lips with her tongue. But what about Kuno? He quickly cut in, stopping her from initiating another liplock. She'll be fine as long as Kurama is watching over her. Now, no more excuses. She twisted on his lips till she was straddling him, her arms wrapped around his neck as they continued to kiss. Removing his hands from Yusaka for a moment he quickly went through a sequence of hand seals before muttering something as Yusaka was sucking on his neck in order to set up a silencing seal. Feeling it activate he slowly began to tug at her clothes with Yusaka doing the same to him. Azazel and Barakiel were let out of Kyoto as the Tengu bowed slightly at the pair before leaving. Immediately Barakiel turned to his friend. What was that back there? Were you so intimidated you couldn't fight back? The boy practically threatened to kill you. Azazel lifted his hands in front of him. Calm down. The reason I agreed was because I'm wary of the boy. You felt his power, didn't you? It was ridiculously large for someone so young. The way he suddenly stopped it coupled with Yusaka not being affected in the slightest speaks of incredible control, which means he could be suppressing the rest of it. Are you sure? He gave Azazel a serious look. His power was on par with some of the Satans, yet you still think he's suppressing more. And he said he was human. With special abilities, Azazel butt in. Regardless, that is unheard of. There's also the fact that I never heard of him, did you? Someone like him should have been discovered earlier. The fact that he has a child with Yusaka should have increased the likelihood of him being known. Azazel shook his head. Didn't Yusaka say that he didn't want to be known through the supernatural? I doubt we would have known of him had none of this happen. Then we would still assume Kuno's father had left Yusaka like she had said when news first came through of her pregnancy. Anyway, once we get back I need you to look through any database you have access to and see if there is anything known about Uzumaki Naruto. We can't let someone as powerful as him walk around without having any information on him. With that said, Azazel looked around before seeing no one was near and released his wings. From his back 6 pairs of wings extended, each black as the night, seemingly ignoring any light that shone on them. Next to him Barakiel copied his actions as 5 pairs of wings came out of his back. Both shared a glance before they were off, leaving no trace behind that they were ever there. In the underworld, Sears Lucifer, the current leader, could be seen looking with a serious expression at the information presented to him. According to the report he was reading, both Azazel and Barakiel were spotted at Kyoto. While it was rare to see 2 of Grigory's high-ranking members in one place at the time, them being there didn't cause him to worry. It was the fact that they had an audience with Yusaka that aroused suspicion. Supposedly it was regarding the attempted kidnapping on Yusaka's daughter, Kuno. News of the attempt had reached them, along with the rest of the supernatural. Reportedly a group of fallen angels were spotted trying to kidnap the young Kyuubi. It was stopped however with little difficulty from what he read. Sears shuffled through the papers scattered on his desk before he found the one he was looking for. He held it in front of him as his eyes looked at it. It was a picture of a young male with blonde hair. Blood-red eyes that shone with warmth as he seemed to be looking at something Sears was unaware of. He looked at what was written underneath the photo. Name: Uzumaki Naruto. Race: presumed human, unknown. Age: between 18 and 20. Residence: Kyoto. Occupation: unknown. Family: Yusaka spouse mate. Kuno daughter. Parents unknown. Siblings unknown. That was all the information they had managed to gather from him, which wasn't a lot. And he didn't like not knowing a lot about potential threats or allies. There was no information about his strength or weaknesses, and Sears doubted Yusaka would have picked just some random male to have children with. No, the report said that they truly loved another, which made him wonder just who Uzumaki Naruto was, as he had never heard of such a person in his long life. It didn't help that the past few weeks a lot of spies had been removed from Kyoto, as they seemed to be increasing their security. He expected their security to increase even further due to the incident regarding Kuno, which made him want to plant more spies there as long as it was still possible. Sears was also curious as what they had discussed with Azazel, as they were spotted wearing frowns as they were led out of Kyoto. Which brought forth more question. Why were they led out of Kyoto? He would have expected them to be allowed to walk out themselves or even stay in Kyoto for a bit, but they were led out personally by a guard. It could mean that they were no longer welcome, but he had discarded that as fallen angels would bring more money to Kyoto unless they had no worries about things like such. Perhaps he should ask Serafal to look further into this. Both for the situation in Kyoto and in the man, Uzumaki Naruto. After all, it was her job to deal with foreign affairs, and this seemed perfect for her. Graphia. Sears called as within second the door to his office opened as a silver-haired woman who looked to be in her early 20s entered. Wearing a maid's outfit. You called for me, Sears-sama. Graphia said as she looked at the crimson-haired man that was her husband. Yes, I did. I want you to contact Serafal and tell her I have an important job for her. He gave a glance at the papers on his desk, which she noticed. She followed his gaze as her eyes landed on the same picture Sears was looking at just minutes ago. Very well. She bowed. I'll inform Serafal-sama that you wish to speak to her. With that, she swiftly turned around and left the room the same way she came in, as Sears was left staring at the spot she previously occupied. He released a sigh. He wished his wife wasn't always so serious with her job as his maid. The stone face she wore while in maid mode, as he called it, was able to make even him feel uneasy. Sears glanced around in his office. Perhaps he should go and look how his adorable younger sister is doing. His eyes lit up at the prospect of embarrassing her like usual. He loved his younger sister, he really did, but he couldn't let opportunities like them pass by. Standing up, he dusted off his jacket before heading out in an attempt to look for his younger sister. There wasn't much to do at the moment till he got to speak with Serafal, so he might as well spend his time doing something useful. As far as embarrassing his sister falls under that category. Naruto could be seen sitting with his back against a tree with Yusaka sitting between his legs. Her back resting against his chest as he had wrapped his arms securely around her waist with his face buried in her hair. The two were currently in Maruyama Park, which was one of Kyoto's most popular parks. Around them more couples could be seen resting with one another. They both watched as Kuno was chasing after Kurama's tail while happily laughing. They both sported smiles as they watched them. Kurama surprisingly didn't mind spending time with the smaller Kyuubi. Having her chase him was also a good way to make her more tired, as she had ridiculously amount of stamina for someone so small. Laughter escaped their lips as they watched Kuno tackle Kurama into the ground. Kurama wriggled in her grasp, doing his best to escape the death grip she had on him. Damn, she's strong for someone so small. He looked at where his former jailer was at and saw him smirking at his misfortune. He would pay him back later. Kuno, come over here, Masumi. Yusaka yelled as Kuno stopped choking Kurama with her grip and turned towards the voice of her mother. Yusaka patted the ground nearby before pointing towards the picnic basket, indicating it was time for lunch. Her eyes lit up at the prospect of food as she skipped over to them. Sitting down, Kuno moved herself closer to her father as Yusaka removed herself from his grip. Opening the basket, Yusaka retrieved a pair of sandwiches she had prepared and handed them to both Naruto and Kuno and threw an apple towards Kurama. Despite being made out of chakra, Kurama was still capable of consuming food and began to munch on the apple Yusaka gave him. Handing out drinks, Yusaka grabbed her own sandwiches before they began to eat as both she and Kuno were resting against him. A few hours later, Naruto and Yusaka were walking back, Kuno seated on his shoulders as she liked the spot. It allowed her to look over the heads of any passers-by and made her feel taller than she really was. As they walked towards their home, they were halted in their tracks as a guard made himself known. Yusaka-sama. The yokai bowed. We have received complaints that someone is bothering the guest near the hot springs. A frown appeared on Yusaka's face as she heard that. She didn't want anyone bothering visitors as it would be bad for business. Don't worry, Yusaka-chan, Naruto said. I'll take care of it if that's fine with you. He looked at her. Yusaka gazed at him for a moment before nodding. Seeing her reply, he removed Kuno from his shoulders before kissing her on the cheek. I have to take care of something, okay? So don't worry, as Ka-san will be with you. The small girl nodded her head as they shared a hug before he raised himself. You can go ahead, I'll be there soon. He pecked her on the lips before waving them goodbye and headed to where the hot springs were located. Ready to take care of whomever might be bothering the visitors. Giving a few nods to any passers-by that recognized him, he quickly reached the building the complaints came from. Suddenly he stopped. He stopped as a certain sound reached his ears. One he never thought he would hear again, here, in this world. It was the sound of giggling. Not the type of giggling one would hear when they heard or saw something funny. No, this one was different. It had a distinctive undertone to it. One that could often be heard in Konoha when a certain toad was present. Slowly Naruto turned around the corner only for him to freeze in his tracks. Impossible. Inside the seal Kurama had the same reaction as he saw what Naruto was looking at. There, hidden in a tree, covered by what he could tell was genjutsu, was a man. Not just any man. No, Naruto easily recognized who it was that was hiding up there. The long mane of spiky white hair that was tied into a ponytail. A short green kimono covered by a red haori and wearing wooden geta. The fact that the person was scribbling onto a notebook while stealing glances at the guest inside the hot springs didn't help either. Snapping his fingers, Naruto put up a barrier around the two. The action caused the man to freeze, albeit for a split second, but it was enough for Naruto to know he felt the small usage of chakra. Despite it, the man did a good job of acting like nothing happened as he continued to scribble of the small notebook he held. Can you come down? You're bothering the visitors. Naruto spoke up, getting the man to glance at him but didn't react. Naruto scowled at the man before his scowl turned into a smirk. Ero Sennin, he called and watched as the man froze. Jiraiya froze as he heard the person call him with a title only one other person ever used. But that should be impossible, as that person shouldn't be here, in this world. Oh yes, Jiraiya knew that he no longer was in the elemental nations, having discovered that the moment he first woke up in a hospital with technology too advanced compared to anything he was used to. Then, when he first stepped outside, it didn't take long for Jiraiya to realize that wherever he was, it was not anywhere he heard of. So after sulking for days and days, unsuccessfully in his attempts to find a way to return, he began to write. He decided to spread the holy book, which was Ika after finding out the women here put those back in Konoha or anywhere really to shame. Girls barely 18 with busts that matched Tsunade. Perhaps he had died and this was heaven. The fact that he needed money was also a factor. Luckily for him, the people here loved his books just as much as they did back in the elemental nations. Becoming a bestseller after mere days of being published. So, hearing someone call him by a title only one person dared to caused him to slowly turn his head towards the speaker. Only to be met by a pair of red eyes that bore into him. Red eyes that showed nothing aside from annoyance and, was that disbelief he spotted there for a second. Jiraiya then took a good look at the person that interrupted him in his work. The person looked no older than 19 and had blonde hair, a shade of blonde he had only seen in two people before. His eyes moved downwards to the clothing the person wore. A black jacket with underneath it a white button-up shirt and dark blue jeans. Jiraiya could faintly make out the outline of what seemed to be a necklace around the young man's neck. All in all, the person looked like no one he knew. Except for the fact that he used that specific title for him. N Naruto? He asked, unsure of himself as he stared at who might be his godson. They stared at one another before slowly the person before him gave a nod. How are you here? Why do you look older than you're supposed to be? Where is this place? Jiraiya fired a barrage of questions at Naruto, who stayed silent. Get out of that tree and follow me. He finally spoke up before turning around and began walking off. Jiraiya stared at his godson's back with interest as he wondered what happened to him to change him from the loud and boisterous boy into, well, this. He got rid of those thoughts though as he jumped out of the tree he was in and hurried after him. Jiraiya followed after Naruto, who walked through the alleyways with practiced ease. Not once speaking a word as he had his hands in the pockets of the jacket he wore. Eventually Naruto stopped walking as he entered what looked like a small tea house. Jiraiya gave it a glance over before he entered as well and spotted Naruto sitting in one of the corners. As Jiraiya made his way over, he let his eyes wander over the young and busty girls that were inside. His hand twitching as he fought back the urge to take out his notebook and write. It didn't take long before a waitress arrived. Your order, Naruto-sama. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at the suffix added to his godson's name before that thought went out of the window as he looked at the beauty that was the woman before him. Chestnut brown hair that was tied in a bun with a few strands framing the side of her face. She was clad in a green kimono while giving a smile at Naruto. All have the usual, Kiori. The woman nodded before turning to the white-haired man opposite of him. Green tea is fine, Jiraiya said as the woman nodded before giving a slight bow and turned around. Say Gaki, WH. Naruto. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. My name is Naruto, not Gaki. Jiraiya rolled his eyes. Fine then Naruto, what is with the Sama crap? Not to mention, did you see her? She was practically undressing you with her eyes. Naruto gave a hum as he went through a few hand signs. Kuchio's no jutsu. A small poof of smoke appeared on the ground next to him as Jiraiya watched as an orange-colored fox appear. Kurama, go to Yusaka and tell her I'm home a bit later but that she doesn't have to worry. Very well, the fox replied with a deep voice, surprising Jiraiya as it stretched its hands. Jiraiya blinked as if he was imagining it, but before he got another look at it the fox was gone. So what was that all about? Jiraiya asked before removing his arms from the table as the waitress from before returned. Thank you. He gave a slight bow to the woman whilst Naruto gave her a small smile which was enough to cause a light blush to appear on her cheeks. Dismissing herself, Naruto turned as he saw Jiraiya's lecherous expression, his eyes moving from him to the waitress who was walking away. Naruto shook his head slightly. It seems that despite the man dying he still was his perverted self. So, Naruto took a sip of the tea. You or me? Jiraiya gained a confused expression for a moment before he understood what he was implying. I'll let you go first as I'm sure I have more to ask than you do. Naruto clicked his tongue before he straightened himself. Alright, how are you here? You're supposed to be dead. I'm not sure myself. One moment I was fighting against Pain, Yahiko or Nagato. I managed to beat one or two of them and captured one in a toad. I figured out who Pain was but was overwhelmed and they impaled me with those black rods of his. Last thing I remembered was writing a code on the back of Fukusaku before I drowned. Then, suddenly I awoke in a hospital. Doctors said they found me stranded near a river with wounds in my back. They treated me before kicking me out and handing me massive bill. Jiraiya grumbled. I tried to find a way back but had no luck. So I decided to spread my legacy. An orange book suddenly appeared in his hand. Naruto looked at it, unimpressed. Not to mention as I needed the money to pay my bills. Jiraiya said to himself. My turn. How are you here and why do you look so different from last time I saw you? Straight to the point I see. I guess by different you also mean older. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow. Naruto shook it off. It will be explained later. How I am here, in the same place as you is because I traveled here. Traveled? Yes. This is going to sound crazy but we are currently in a different world from the elemental nations, or shinobi world if you want to call it that. I see you don't believe me, this world is connected to the shinobi world. Don't ask me how, it just is. I was able to get here due to me having a manner of transportation that is capable of bringing me here. He didn't want to reveal everything to the man as you never know what might happen. I have actually visited this world before, you know. He took another sip of the tea before it got cold. I spent over 4 years here. That's impossible. Unless you're really older than you look, you couldn't have time to visit this world for as long as you said you had. The only time you would have enough time would be during our training trip. Are you implying what I think you are? Jiraiya asked with disbelief. He received a nod in response. You know that fight I had with Sasuke? When he almost killed me, I awakened something deep within me. It gave me ways to enter this world undeterred and I was as surprised as you were the first time you traveled around. The thing I awoke also gave me knowledge about this world and with the help of Cage Bunshins I was able to quickly get up to date with the ongoing events. Going as far that I'm able to admit that I know more than I should. But how did you manage to fool me? I guess when I went on a training trip with what I thought was you. It was me, at least for the beginning. When I awakened my abilities I gained knowledge on certain things, so when you went and acted like the perverted man you are, instead of teaching me I decided it was enough. I created a Cage Bunshin and made sure to add a nice portion of Kyuubi's chakra with it. Slapped a dozen or so reinforcement seals on it and left. Naruto said as he watched Jiraiya's reaction. Though I have to say that you barely thought the clone anything. You didn't even start on any elemental manipulation. Literally the only thing my clone learned was to make a bigger Rasengan and make use of Kyuubi's chakra it had. His tone held no anger or loathing, just disappointment as Jiraiya averted his gaze. His words were true as he indeed had focused most of their time attempting to control the Kyuubi aside from jutsus or elemental manipulation. You still haven't answered why you look so different. My eyes and hair, you mean? It happened due to the awakening of my abilities. He closed his eyes before opening them and Jiraiya could see they went from blood red to cerulean blue. Blinking once they were back to their original color. Now for why I'm older. During my first trip here I discovered that time went faster. Shocking Jiraiya. 3 years in the elemental nations was little over 4.5 years here, which is why instead of 17 which I should be I'm close to 19. 19 huh? Late congratulations I suppose. Jiraiya said quite lamely. So, why are you here and not back home? This is my home, Jiraiya. The white-haired man gave him a, you know what I mean, look causing him to sigh. But to answer your question I just needed to escape it all. Escape what exactly? Everything. It's just, you know my younger years were quite bad. Jiraiya winced at the mention of his childhood. He had been appointed his godfather yet wasn't there when he needed him the most. His childhood. The suffering I had during my childhood had a bigger effect than one would think when they would see me. I mean, who would think that I had any issues with the big smiles I used to wear each time? Hey, and they would often say how I ignored their hateful stares, the way parents would keep their children away from me, telling them I was evil incarnate. Let me tell you, it is impossible to ignore their words. You could try, but your brain would just store the memory of their words in the back of your mind. And eventually it would break the chains that kept those memories suppressed and surge forward. I should know, as I had to deal numerous times with it. Even years later I still would see mental images of their looks, hear their words in the back of my mind. So while everyone would see me as a smiling idiot that wouldn't let words get to him, I was actually broken on the inside. Naruto ran one of his hands through his hair as Jiraiya said nothing. Not to mention finding out my parents are alive and I apparently have a sister was just too much. Jiraiya's head snapped towards him once he had finished that sentence, eyes wide as if he heard it incorrect. Say what? He exclaimed before calming himself as a few looks were sent his way. Are you saying Minato and Kushina are alive? Naruto nodded. Correct, along with a younger sister. They appeared during the last moments of the war. Shocking Jiraiya once more as he revealed that there had been another war but kept quiet. So while I was suffering of loneliness and whatever a child my age shouldn't have, they were somewhere else, raising a second child. He let out a chuckle that sounded so hollow even Jiraiya flinched. I guess it didn't feel like my home, since even my parents didn't want me. Naruto glanced down at the table. Though I have no regrets of leaving, I feel more welcome here in this world. Though I can always return if I want. He muttered softly. What was that? Jiraiya asked as he heard him mutter something. Naruto looked at the man, wondering if he should repeat what he said. I said I feel more at home here. Not that. What came after? I have a way to return to the elemental nations if I wish to do such. Can you send me back? Naruto blinked. Why? Why do you want to go back? Do you want to ruin the memory they have of you? Everyone knows you died fighting against pain in aim. That you sacrificed your own life in an attempt to stop the Akatsuki from continuing their actions. You provided vital information that helped beat the supposed leader at the cost of your own life. Do you really want to ruin that? He stared at the man. Jiraiya didn't reply as he stared at Naruto for a second. Still not used at his manner of speaking that was so different from the loud boy he remembered. Finally he shook his head. No, he didn't want to ruin what had already happened. Their memories of him. Though he really wanted to speak with Minato and Kushina and ask what the fuck was going on and how they were alive. The same would be said about him, but he at least had an actual reason. Then there is also the fact that you might go and spread information about me, something I don't want as I have no interest in speaking with any of them. Naruto glanced around looking for a clock or something that showed how late it was. Hey Naruto, what happened to that necklace Tsunade gave you? I can see the one you're wearing is a different one. Ah yes. He pulled it out of his shirt and revealed a expensive-looking amulet. It was made out of gold and Jiraiya could see numerous different gemstones embedded in the locket. All in all it looked like something that came from one of those fantasy movies he had seen. Which made Jiraiya curious how he was able to afford such a thing. Don't worry, I didn't sell it if that's what you're wondering. No, I gave it to someone special to me. A lecherous grin formed on Jiraiya's face. Oh, you already have someone special. Is that why you ignored that waitress? Say, when are you going to introduce me to her? She has to be really special to gain your attention. I mean, when you were younger you were head over heels with that pink-haired girl, Sakura or something. Though that might be just an act seeing how you are acting now. Naruto just stared at the man as he continued to talk, forming numerous speculations without waiting for an answer. To answer your rambling, yes, the person I gave it to is very special to me, but she's not my girlfriend. But it is a woman. Jiraiya smirked. Naruto decided to ignore the man. As for when I'm going to introduce you, no idea. I have no interest in Sakura either, which reminds me of that Hyuga who confessed her love for me just before I left. A chilling smirk appeared on his face as he remembered how he had put her down. Oh, tell me, Hinata Hyuga is her name, she's the heiress to the family. Dark blue hair with a Byakugan. Well before I left she decided it was the perfect time to confess her love for me, why she thought that I don't know. Anyway, she went on to tell some sob story about her family treating her bad due to her not acting like a proper Hyuga and whatnot. Then she had to ruin it by comparing her tragic childhood to mine. He scoffed. She, an heiress to one of Konoha's most influential and richest families. Where their dislike of her was her own fault, mine was due to something I couldn't control. Where she had dozens of people caring for her, I was alone. I had nothing yet she dared to compare her suffering to mine. I broke her with just words and when I was finished she was a shivering mess. Jiraiya stared at his godson who showed a side he never seen before. He could practically feel the satisfaction rolling off of him as he finished talking. Did you not go overboard on the girl? Naruto just gave him a look that screamed he couldn't care less. Tell you what, it's getting late so how about we meet up tomorrow same place around noon? I'm busy with some stuff regarding seals and you might be able to help me. Perhaps I might introduce you to my girlfriend. Alright, but what is in it for me? How about not getting kicked out for peeping on women? Naruto deadpanned. TCH, fine. Good, you have a place to stay. Jiraiya shook his head. Naruto grumbled before he took a note and wrote something on it. Here, it's the direction to one of the better hotels around. Just hand over the note to the receptionist and it should take care of whatever questions they will ask. His eyes seemed to focus on something happening outside. Seems I have something to take care of. Jiraiya followed his gaze and spotted a pair of dark-haired men bothering a couple women. Standing up from his seat, Naruto walked up to them before, much to the surprise and shock of Jiraiya, grabbed both men by the throat. Sorry ladies, but I'll take care of these two. He gave them a charming smile that elicited a blush. He entered an alley with both men trying to escape his grasp before they were slammed against the wall. Tell me, you crow, did Azazel not tell you your kind is no longer welcome here? Or did you ignore him and thought we wouldn't follow up on our threat that any fallen that enters Kyoto will be killed? He concentrated on Nibi's chakra as wisps of blue flames flickered in existence around his hands. Well, tell me. He loosened the grip slightly but not enough for them to escape. What do you think you're doing? Your leader won't approve of this. Naruto raised an eyebrow. I think she would, especially since your kind tried to kidnap Yusaka and mine's daughter. As those words left his mouth, both men realized they were done for. I warned Azazel that any crows will be killed if I get my hands on them. You two are no exception. It was your own foolishness that you decided to ignore Azazel's warning and now you are paying the price. The flames increased in intensity as they slowly crept up his arms and towards both men. He was glad he had placed a small soundproof barrier around him as no one was able to hear their screams as they were reduced to ashes as the blue flames of Matabi were more powerful than regular flames. Jiraiya watched as Naruto walked out of the alley just a minute later. The two men he had grabbed were nowhere to be seen. Getting curious, Jiraiya stood up, Naruto having walked away and entered the alley he was previously in. It had a dead end but he spotted two small piles of ash and Jiraiya was quick to come to the conclusion that Naruto had killed those men. He would ask him about it tomorrow as it was indeed getting late. The only thing Jiraiya was sure of was that his godson had changed a lot since last time. Golden eyes fluttered open as Yusaka awoke, her head was resting in the crook of Naruto's neck with her body on top of his. Slowly Yusaka leaned up till she was straddling him. Her legs were placed on each side of the man below her. MMWHAA, Yusaka yawned as she stretched her arms over her head. Slightly adjusting the silky black night robe she wore, she leaned back down before breathing in his scent. Her body rising and lowering with his heartbeat. A mischievous smirk made itself known on her face as she began to nip at his neck. Her nips turned into small bites before long she was sucking on his skin, doing her best to leave a hickey. Already this early, Naruto's voice got her attention as she felt him wrap his arms around her. One of his hands moving lower till he was groping her cheek, causing her to release a pleasure-filled mewl. Yusaka hummed as she removed herself from his neck. A satisfied gleam in her eyes as she watched the spot turn red. Naruto knew what she had done as he could feel the satisfaction she had. For some reason hickeys or other love bites didn't heal like it did when he had a wound and would have to wait for it to naturally disappear. As much as I enjoy this, he was interrupted as Yusaka kissed him. As I said, as much as I enjoy this we have to get up. Kuno will sooner already as wake up and I have to meet someone today. Who? She asked, and he barely heard her as she had her face pressed against him. Just someone from my past that I can have a proper conversation with for more than a minute. Now, I'll go check up on Kuno while you prepare breakfast as I can't really cook. He winked at Yusaka before he jumped out of bed and left the room. Baka, Yusaka said fondly as watched the door close behind him. Single quote. Alright, is there something wrong? I've been talking to you for the past half hour but you keep staring. Naruto asked Jiraiya as the two were sitting in the same tea house as yesterday. The man had asked him to give a shortened version of the war that had happened, something he did. Though Jiraiya kept averting his gaze downwards every few minutes. Oh, nothing, Jiraiya said with a dismissive wave. Though, his lecherous grin formed. I wonder who gave you that. He smirked and motioned to the red spot on his neck. Naruto clicked his tongue at the man's words as he ran his fingers over the hickey Yusaka had given him. He should have expected Jiraiya to be more interested in anything when it had to do with woman, but still. TCH, you never change, I see. Can't say the same about you, Jiraiya mumbled as he remembered yesterday's events when they parted ways. If Naruto had heard him, he did a good job of not showing it as an awkward silence reigned for a moment. Say, you never told me what you did for them to call you, Naruto-sama. Ah, it's just a matter of knowing the correct people. Anyway, since you probably didn't listen and I'm not in the mood to repeat myself, I'll explain why I wanted to talk to you. He slightly leaned forward. I'll get straight to the point. I need your help. Are you aware of the supernatural? Jiraiya slowly nodded his head, much to his silent relief as he didn't want to go on another explanation that would take forever. During his travels, Jiraiya had spotted numerous people with a pair of wings behind their back. First few times he wrote it off as his imagination. I mean, men and women with a pair of wings. That's impossible. Then again, back where he's from, people were capable of doing all kinds of crazy stuff with chakra. From walking on water and walls to spitting out a fireball. Good, that'll save me a lot of time. Now, a few days ago a few fallen managed to sneak into Kyoto undetected, which is a problem by itself as those disgusting crows are trash and should be killed on the spot. He sneered much to Jiraiya's surprise. Those crows did something that angered a lot of people, including the ruler of Kyoto, who had forbidden any fallen from entering lest they want to be killed. Those two men who were bothering those women yesterday were crows as well, so I got rid of them. Something I'm allowed to, as Kyoto is ruled by the yokai faction. Now, you know how Konoha has a barrier surrounding it, alerting them each time someone who's not supposed or allowed enters. Yes, well, I wanted to design on for Kyoto as well. Preferably with seals instead of runes, as seals aren't really known here. While I should be able to do this by myself, it would take me a while, so I wanted to ask if you could help. Naruto handed over some designs he had in mind for Jiraiya to look over. Jiraiya had to say he was impressed as he looked over the notes Naruto had made. He had no idea he was this good with seals, then again he actually knew very little about him now that he thought about it. This is pretty impressive, Jiraiya mused. I can see some areas where you could improve, though from what I can see you want this to be connected to certain people. He received a nod. Do you have a pencil? Jiraiya asked before he was given one. He marked a few areas in the ceiling matrix that could be improved and strengthened before adding another layer over it. This seems a bit better. It's still a rough sketch, but you get the idea, Jiraiya said as Naruto looked at what he had added. If I help you, what's in it for me? What do you want? Jiraiya tapped his finger on the table as he hummed in thought. I want a few things. First thing is that I want you to introduce me to that special woman of yours. I'm curious as to see who managed to win over that heart of yours. Second thing I want is free housing whenever I'm here. I know you're capable of doing this, so no complaining. Last but not least is that I want to return to the shinobi world one day. I know what I said yesterday, but some things don't add up and I want to seek answers. Naruto said nothing for a moment as he merely stared at the man. Finally, after what seemed like forever, he slowly nodded his head. That is acceptable, I guess. Good. Jiraiya smirked. Now how about we order something to drink before we continue? I'm getting thirsty and the weather isn't helping much. Naruto and Jiraiya were walking through the streets of Kyoto. The two gained numerous looks sent their way as they wondered who the white-haired man was that was walking next to Naruto. Alright, we're almost there, and remember, control yourself or I'll kick you out. Naruto said as he glanced at Jiraiya, who firmly nodded. No way was he going to waste his chance at seeing this mystery woman his godson seemed so fond of. They stopped walking as they stood before an old Japanese-styled house. Jiraiya gave it a look over before they headed towards it. He raised an eyebrow as he saw a guard on each side of the front door. Who is that Naruto-sama? One of them asked as they gazed at the white-haired man behind him. Don't worry, he's a guest. He gave them a small smile. Understanding, both guards gave him a bow as they allowed him entrance as Jiraiya followed quickly behind. So, this is your home? Jiraiya asked as they slowly walked through the hallway. Yes. Who is that? Naruto stopped walking as he heard Jiraiya's question. Turning around he saw that the man's eyes were glued on a large painting. Naruto had a small smirk as he saw Jiraiya trying to undress the woman in the painting. The woman in the painting had blonde hair a shade or two darker than his own, done in a ponytail. A couple strands covering both her forehead and one side of her face. Golden slitted eyes seemingly staring straight at you coupled with a pleasant smile. All in all, to Jiraiya she was one of the most beautiful women he had seen, which said a lot as the women in this world were leagues ahead of those back home. Sure, there were a few exceptions such as Tsunade and Kushina, but even those were matched here. The woman in the painting, however, there was something with her. Despite it being a painting, she seemed to radiate an otherworldly beauty, one not capable of being reached by humans. Done staring? If so, then we can continue. As they continued to walk, the smell of food being cooked reached their noses as a fond smile made its way onto his face. As they entered the living room, they could hear the soft sound of someone humming, though Naruto already knew who it was. Yusaka-chan, I'm home. I also brought someone you should meet. So, Yusaka is her name, huh? Jiraiya mused as he sat down onto one of the couches. The humming seemed to have stopped and the sound of footsteps heading their way was heard in its place. Welcome back, Naruto-kun, a feminine voice spoke up from behind him. Jiraiya turned around and froze as he stared at the owner of the voice. While Jiraiya was frozen in what he would guess was shock, Naruto walked over to her. He kissed her once he was close enough, which she happily returned. Breaking the kiss, she rested her head against him as he slowly swayed with her in his arms. Naruto-kun, who is he? She asked, glancing at the white-haired man who was still frozen in shock. He's someone that will help me when it comes to creating the defense barrier around Kyoto. Don't worry, you can trust him as he's aware of the supernatural. And if that's not enough, he's also my godfather. I see, Yusaka mumbled as she watched the man slowly come out of his shocked state. You are the woman from the painting I saw earlier. Jiraiya said as if he were in some sort of trance. His eyes moving from his godson to the woman as his arms. Naruto, Jiraiya said softly as both he and Yusaka were curious what he was about to say. I am so proud. Tears ran down his face as he looked at them. For you to score such a babe, not even in my wildest imagination would I have guessed such a thing. You truly are my best student. He wiped his tears away as they deadpanned at him. Did you already forgot what I told you earlier, Jiraiya? No, I did not. He replied meekly. Now, how about you introduce yourself, Ah yes. He stood up from where he was seated and walked over. My name is Jiraiya, Gama Sennin and godfather of Naruto. He introduced himself with a slight bow. Nice to meet you, Jiraiya-san, my name is Yusaka. Leader of Kyoto and Naruto-kun's mate. She introduced herself in kind. Jiraiya raised an eyebrow at the term she used to describe their relationship but didn't comment on it. Hey Yusaka, is Kuno home? Yes, she is, probably in her room waiting for you. Or dinner. Kuno? Jiraiya inquired. Who was this Kuno person? Kuno is RD, Yusaka was cut off as a small blonde blur. Tu-san, you're home. The small blonde blur said as she was wrapped up in Naruto's arms. Hey little one, he said as he kissed her on the cheek. Tu-san, Jiraiya muttered as he watched the small blonde girl in his godson's arms. Naruto, is that? He trailed off. Correct. He nodded with a proud smile. Jiraiya, meet Kuno, Yusaka and mine's daughter. The small girl turned around and looked at the white-haired man. Her head tilted cutely to the side as she brought one of her tails in front of her. Hello, she waved at him. As he looked at her, Jiraiya could see that despite the girl having most of her features from Yusaka, there were some signs it was indeed Naruto's. First were her eyes. They were similar to Yusaka's with the exception that they held a red tint to them. The same color Naruto had. The other was her hair that held a tint of blonde that could only come from his godson or Minato, but the latter was out of question. He also spotted a familiar necklace hanging around her neck and understood what Naruto meant when he told him about it yesterday. Tails and ears? He asked as he looked at her parents. His shock increased as Yusaka now had a pair of blonde fox ears poking through her hair with 9 fluffy blonde tails hovering behind her. Yusaka-chan is a Kyuubi yokai, same with Kuno-chan here. Though she's half yokai half whatever I am, though I guess the closest thing would be human. Naruto said with a smile as he hugged her closer to him. But she's what, 3, 4 years old? That means that you had her when you were. Yup. I managed to get Yusaka-chan pregnant when I was just a child. He chuckled softly. It happened during the first time I visited this world. She had taken a liking to me, and next thing you know. He glanced downwards at Kuno, who was comfortably resting as he released a warm aura. She happened. I see. Is this why you had no interest in girls from your home world? A nod was his answer. That, and they were weak when compared with Yusaka-chan here. Don't get me wrong, I love Yusaka, but with both her own and my genes, Kuno will become very powerful in the future. Something she needs when she will take over from her mother. Are you sure? It sounds to me you're making her into a weapon. No sooner Jiraiya finished that sentence, he felt like the gravity around his and tripled as he slowly looked upwards at Naruto, whose eyes seemed to burn into him. How dare you insinuate something like that, Toad? I love them both more than I love myself and would destroy anything that dares to harm them. For you to even think that, you should be glad you're my godfather, or you'd be gone by now. Never insinuate something like that ever again, got it? Jiraiya weakly nodded before sighing in relief as the invisible weight around him was removed. Sorry, it's just that you reminded me of someone. He apologized, having just seen his own death at Naruto's hands. Naruto stared at the man for a moment before he nodded. Fine, just. He shook his head and took a deep breath as Yusaka intertwined his hand with her own. Thank you. Yusaka gave him a soft smile as he calmed down. Breaking the silence, Yusaka removed herself from him and stood up. I'm going to finish the dinner I was preparing. Are you joining us or not? She looked at Jiraiya, who in turn glanced at Naruto, who gave a shrug as he was busy playing with Kuno's ears. If I don't impose. Yusaka just gave a smile before she and Naruto shared a kiss as she walked back to the kitchen. Leaving the three behind as Jiraiya watched Naruto smile and laugh as he was playing with his daughter's tails while Kuno did her best to evade his hands. Watching them, Jiraiya would guess they had no worries as they acted so carefree. Unfortunately, he knew that it wasn't as it looked, though like Naruto he would enjoy it for as long as it would last. End chapter.